Book 8, The 10,000 Kilometer Journey Chapter 49, Saint-Level Dragon Blood Warrior. The cold wind continued to blow. The desolate wilderness had finally returned to its former calm. But compared to earlier, atop the wild plains, there were a number of corpses as well as pools of blood. The aftermath of the battle was easily visible. The ground was cracked open in many places, and there was that giant crater, with that deep hole in the center of it. At this moment, a black shadow mouse slowly, wearily crawled out of that deep hole. Boss! Bibi's body was stained red, blood matting his fur. Bebe was staring forward in concern. He saw that Linley was lying there, not moving at all. Although the cherub, thanks to the influence of the blood-violet sword's baleful aura, had seen its attack weakened, the force of its blow was still several times greater than that of the two winged angels. Bebe scurried forward, arriving next to Linley. "Boss, you okay?" Bebe mentally transmitted. Bebe was very worried. Right now, Linley's chest had an astonishingly deep indentation, with over half of the scales on his chest shattered and fallen. Fresh blood had dyed Linley's chest totally red, and Linley's face was very pale. His eyes were closed. Slowly, Linley opened his eyes, looking at Bebe. "I'm fine. Bebe. Don't move my body." Linley's voice rang out in Bibi's mind. Bebe nodded obediently, settling into a curl near Linley's body. "This time, I was wounded very badly." Linley felt that his chest was racking him with severe pain with each breath he took. Linley's only option was to urge the dragon blood battle chi in his vessels to help repair some of the damage he had taken, in accordance with the method prescribed in the secret dragon blood manual. As a supreme warrior, his recuperative abilities were quite formidable. But this time, the injury really was very severe. The dragon blood battle chi slowly flowed through each part of his body, as the unique energy of the dragon blood in his veins slowly seeped into his blood vessels and heart. As for his chest, which had suffered the majority of the damage this time, after it drew some of the special energy from his dragon blood, Linley could feel it slowly begin to recover. With each breath, Linley could feel his chest slowly changing. In terms of regenerative speed, amongst the four supreme warriors, the dragon blood warriors should be inferior to the violet flame warriors and the undying warriors. In a time like this thought suddenly crossed Linley's mind. The violet flame warriors possessed incredibly strong regenerative abilities, and even had that freakishly powerful nirvana rebirth ability. Unless their bodies were entirely destroyed, given enough time, a violet flame warrior would be able to recover to their peak condition. Huff! Puff! The sound of Linley's breathing grew louder and louder, as his damaged chest continued to recuperate. At the same time, the black scales covering Linley's body retracted, as did his spikes and his tail. In the blink of an eye, Linley returned to his normal human form. But despite now being in human form, Linley's body was still covered in blood, and the injury to his chest was as severe as ever. As time passed, the night began to deepen. The cold wind blew drearily. The light of the moon was totally blocked by the clouds. But Linley and Bebe paid no heed to the weather at all. "Boss, doing better?" Bibi's beady little eyes stared unwaveringly at Linley. "My internal injuries are more or less fixed. Only 3 of my ribs are broken. Fortunately, they didn't pierce into any other vital regions." Linley revealed a smile towards Bebe. "However, it will take at least 10 days or half a month for broken ribs to recover. Normal people would need several months to heal a broken rib." Linley was only able to make this claim because of his confidence in his lineage as a dragon blood warrior. Bebe nodded. "But if I were able to find a light style or a water style magus, I should be able to recover even more quickly." Linley knew that certain types of magical healing could be extremely powerful. When Linley had been imprisoned within the Radiant Temple, virtually every single bone in his body had been broken. But when he had been bathed in that holy light of the Radiant Sovereign, his body completely healed in the blink of an eye, and was restored to peak condition. This sort of astonishing recuperative ability was very formidable. Linley continued to generate his dragon blood battle chi. The dragon blood battle chi absorbed the elemental essence from nature, and it also absorbed the unique dragon blood lineage in Linley's veins. As it gradually strengthened, it nourished every part of Linley's body. Linley's internal injuries were now almost completely healed. The only tricky part remaining was his shattered ribs. Linley's eyebrows shot up, and he felt a hint of delight. The dragon blood battle chi circulating throughout his body suddenly began to tremble, and the liquefied dragon blood battle chi in his dantian suddenly roiled about like the waves of the sea. Linley immediately guided all of the dragon blood battle chi in his veins into his lower dantian. Very soon, the density of dragon blood battle chi in his lower dantian reached its maximum peak. Rumble. A radiant smile blossomed on Linley's face as he sensed the dragon blood battle chi in his dantian begin to transform. Every single shred of battle chi was changing. Changing in quality and nature. I'm finally beginning to break through. Linley calmly waited. At first, only a small amount of dragon blood battle chi had been transformed, but as time went on, more and more transformed, and at a faster and faster rate. At the end, in the space of time it would take a person to breathe 10 times, the remaining half of the battle chi all transformed successfully. Haha! Linley rose to his feet, dispersing the totally transformed dragon blood battle chi in his veins to every part of his body. Some of it was sent to his shattered ribs, assisting them to recover more rapidly. Boss! Bei looked at Linley with curiosity. Linley hugged Bei, lifting him into the air. Laughing, he said, I'm fine. Let's prepare to go home. At this time, Linley was extremely happy. Ever since he had reached the peak of the 8th rank, he had been waiting for this day. Although in the past month, Linley had the feeling that he could break through at any moment, that moment somehow just wouldn't come. But now, while he had been healing his injuries, he had suddenly broken through. The 9th rank. From this day forward, Linley was a warrior of the 9th rank, but that was just his nominal level of power. In reality, after dragon forming, Linley was already an early-stage saint-level combatant. In terms of defense, speed, or power, he had dramatically grown. If I were to encounter that four-winged angel again, just by using the adamantine heavy sword, I would be able to dispose of her. Linley was very excited. The saint level. That was a brand new level of existence. Even the mighty Dawson conglomerate desperately desired to have a saint-level warrior amongst their ranks. The mighty Jacques clan was mighty, precisely because they had a single saint-level combatant. This was their pride and the source of their arrogance. This was why they had the confidence and the ability to administer the O'Brien Empire's Northwest Administrative Province in perpetuity. An expert of the saint level. Before a saint-level combatant, even the Grand Dukes and Kings who administered and ruled over populations of millions or tens of millions meant nothing at all. Before a saint-level combatant, even an ancient clan that had existed for thousands of years would have to lower their noble heads. Even the Radiant Church, the Cult of Shadows, and the four great empires would deeply desire to pull saint-level combatants into their orbit. In the entire Yulon continent, aside from those three humans who stood at the peak of the world, the High Priest, the War God, and the King of Killers, or the two deity-level kings of magical beasts, saint-level combatants were the cream of the crop. Upon entering the saint level, one would immediately possess an unlimited life. The King of Killers, Caesar, had lived for 5,000 years as a saint level, had he not? The saint level. Linley raised his head to the sky. Suddenly, flakes of snow began to drift down from the heavens, melting when they touched Linley's face. I still remember those two saint-level experts doing battle in Wushan Township when I was a child. At that time, saint-level combatants were unfathomably high entities, far beyond the likes of me. Even that Magus of the 8th rank who rode on a Velocidragon was an expert. But now, a sense of pride swelled up in Linley's heart. At last, he had accomplished something. Most likely, if the current Linley were to encounter the stellar sword saint, Dylan, he would be able to defeat him. Ancestors of the Barak clan, keep watching me. I will restore the fame and the legend of the Dragon Blood Warriors, and spread it across the continent. Linley felt a sense of absolute self-confidence. Linley was only 26 years old, this year. But upon dragon forming, he was a saint-level warrior. There will come a day when I reach an even higher peak of power. A hint of a smile was on Linley's face. Linley knew exactly how powerful he was. Although he was only an early-stage saint level after dragon forming, the hardest part of advancing from the early stage to the peak stage of the saint level was not in accumulating battle chi. Rather, it was in gaining a deeper level of understanding and insight regarding the world. But Linley's level of understanding was already at that of a peak stage saint level. In truth, sometimes two people who had the same amount of battle chi and similarly deep levels of understanding would still have major differences in their power. This was because different people would walk different paths to wisdom, even if they were in the same realm. For example, another combatant might also be training in the laws of the earth, but after the imposed level, he might have taken a totally different route. After all, the laws of the earth were as boundless and infinite as the oceans, and there were many paths one could take in understanding them. Different paths would result in different results. Linley's path was akin to the throbbing pulse of the earth itself, using those strange vibrational attacks. It was totally different to the usual types of force and power-based attacks used within the Yulon continent. Just as Linley was preparing to head back to the Cloud Peaks village, suddenly, "Linley, right!" a voice rang out from not too far behind him. Linley's heart jumped in fright. He hadn't noticed that there was someone nearby. He immediately turned his head to look, only to see a black-robed, skinny old man with a few flecks of white in his hair, standing in mid-air. The old man was staring down at Linley from mid-air. Linley immediately understood. Mackenzie. Right. This person was indeed Mackenzie. Linley had just suffered a serious wound, and had been focusing on healing himself. He had totally forgotten that this major battle he had just fought against those 6 angels definitely would not escape the attention of the nearby saint-level combatant, Mackenzie, who was residing in the provincial capital. Linley carefully looked at Mackenzie. Mackenzie looked as though he were in his early 50s. Although his hair had a few streaks of white, there wasn't a single wrinkle on his face. He stood in mid-air with his waist ramrod straight, with an immovable aura that made Linley feel secretly amazed. This Mackenzie was definitely more powerful than that 4-winged cherub. "How long have you been here?" Linley asked. Mackenzie laughed. "Not too long. When I arrived, I managed to witness you and the 4-winged cherub exchanging your final blows to each other and injuring each other." Linley raised an eyebrow. This Mackenzie should have been watching the entire time as Linley had been healing himself. Since he didn't act against Linley when Linley was injured, he probably didn't have any ill intentions towards Linley. "I am very surprised that you actually managed to kill a cherub." Mackenzie sighed in appreciation. "Although the 4-winged angels are only temporarily able to use their full strength, for you to be able to kill one without dying is quite amazing. Dragon Blood Warriors, the legendary Dragon Blood Warriors really are powerful. Linley, after dragon forming, you should be at the saint level, I believe. Only, given how difficult it was for you to kill a cherub, you should only be an early-stage saint-level warrior, right?" Linley started, not knowing whether he should laugh or cry. This Mackenzie, geez, Linley was speechless. He thought to himself, only after I killed the 4-winged angel did I gain the ability to reach the saint level in dragon form. This Mackenzie actually thinks that I had already reached the saint level when I was fighting with the cherub. "What, you haven't reached the saint level?" Mackenzie said disbelievingly. Linley smiled. "I admit that after dragon forming, I am indeed at the early stage saint level." Mackenzie laughed and nodded with satisfaction. "Haha, it's been a long time since I've seen a saint-level combatant. I really am quite happy to see you today. How about this? Come with me to my residence for a time. That way, the two of us can spar a bit." I'm sure that this will definitely help both of us improve our abilities. Don't worry, I won't go full force, this is just a sparring match. Seeing that Linley suffered serious injuries while killing a four-winged angel, Mackenzie believed Linley was not truly a match for him. Mackenzie, my dragon form is indeed at the saint level. However, Linley looked confidently at Mackenzie. I just broke through to that level now, after the battle. When I was fighting against the cherub, I hadn't broken through yet. Right now, as far as Linley was concerned, although he wasn't confident in his ability to deal with peak stage saint level experts, he was still confident in dealing with people at Mackenzie's level. Having reached the saint level, there was no longer a need for him to conceal himself or hide his power. What? You broke through just now? Mackenzie was shocked to hear this. Book 8, The 10,000 Kilometer Journey Chapter 50, An Appointment. Mackenzie's view of Linley had totally changed. Haha, after being silent for a moment, Mackenzie laughed loudly. He descended from the skies, slowly walking towards Linley, his attitude noticeably more warm and friendly. Linley, the legendary genius magus, supposedly the second greatest genius in history. But in my opinion, your talent as a warrior is even greater than as a magus. To be so young and yet already have the power of the saint level, the dragon blood warriors truly are supreme warriors. Linley had always been proud of his clan's heritage. But whenever he thought back to how his clan had all but been destroyed, with only himself and his younger brother remaining, he couldn't help but feel a thread of grief in his heart. Mr. Mackenzie, is there anything else? If there isn't, I need to go back now. Linley said. Mackenzie hurriedly said, My friend Linley, this is our first meeting. Why don't we have a nice get-together? I'm very curious about you legendary dragon blood warriors as well. If there's enough time, I truly do wish to have a sparring contest against you, Linley. After all, sparring against experts of the same level is one of the best ways a saint-level combatant can improve. As he finished speaking, Mackenzie looked very earnestly at Linley. Spar? Mackenzie was the local hegemon of the Northwest Administrative Province. Being able to get on good terms with Mackenzie was of benefit to him. And in addition, Keene belonged to the Northwest Administrative Province as well. This could be considered helping Keene out as well. Considering for a moment, Linley nodded. I'm still wounded. Even if I did go to your residence, I wouldn't be able to immediately spar with you. How about this? I'll go home first, but after a period of time, I'll come back and pay a visit to you. It won't be too long, a month or so at most. Mackenzie happily nodded. Wonderful. Then I will await your arrival within the Jacques clan's castle. I'll definitely come. Linley smiled and nodded. It had begun to snow, and snowflakes were flying everywhere. Mackenzie and Linley, these two saint-level combatants, smiled at each other, then flew off in different directions. In the vast wilderness, only Linley and Bebe were left present. The winter's snow. Seeing the endless snowfall, Linley suddenly thought back to that huge blizzard that winter when he was young and in love with Alice. The next year, also on a day of a blizzard, Linley and Alice had separated. And then, within the mountain range of magical beasts, on another snowy day, Linley had come to understand the impose level. Now, on a fourth blizzard, tonight, Linley had broken through to the 9th rank as a warrior, with his true power now totally within the realm of the saint levels. Snow. Linley felt extremely moved. But when he lowered his head and looked at himself, his smile disappeared. Astonished, he said, I chatted with a saint-level combatant for such a long time, looking like this. Because of his transformation and his battle against the angels, Linley's clothes and pants had been turned utterly ruined. The way he currently looked, even beggars would probably feel sorry for him. However, just now, Mackenzie hadn't paid any attention to his attire. In truth, when many saint-level combatants engaged in training, they would sometimes train for months at a time. It was normal for their bodies to become incredibly filthy. Thus, they didn't care too much about superficial appearances. What they cared about was what a person was like inside. For example, although Linley's clothes were in absolutely wretched shape, no one would dare look down upon him as he stood there. This was a person's aura and demeanor. "Boss, you said you have reached the saint level? Transform and let me admire my boss's magnificence." Beebe's beady little eyes stared at Linley as he intentionally said those flattering words. An excited feeling entered Linley's heart. That was not a bad idea at all. "Fine," Linley said with a laugh. Bebe immediately leapt off of Linley's shoulders as once again, those black scales emerged from Linley's skin. Sharp spikes erupted from his forehead, knees, and elbows, while his eyes once more transformed into that dark golden color. He looked exactly the same as he had before. But Linley could feel the difference. Whoosh! Linley felt the unique energy of the exalted dragon blood hiding in his veins begin to flow into his bones, his muscles, and even his armor, spikes, and draconic tail. The originally pitch-black scales were actually beginning to shine with a hint of blue light. What a feeling of power! Linley could feel that his vision and his hearing had suddenly increased dozens of times in sensitivity. Nothing within several kilometers of him could escape his notice. Such powerful strength! Such powerful battle chi! Linley balled his fist, and the air itself shuddered once. His mighty muscles now contained far greater power than before, and the amount of battle chi in his body had grown vastly. "Ha!" Linley began to laugh excitedly. Late at night, Linley was flying across the desolate landscape. He, a fully transformed dragon blood warrior, looked like a monster as he floated through the air, occasionally letting out overjoyed bouts of wild laughter. His laughter echoed in the heavens and in the earth. No wonder Barker was so excited when he reached the saint level. "I didn't expect that my power would increase this much after reaching this level." Linley was extremely excited as well. Dragon blood warriors had many innate gifts. Once their power reached a certain level, they would naturally be able to fly. This was like the flight which flying magical beasts innately possessed. It was a natural ability which didn't require any particular understanding or insights. In terms of mysteriousness and exaltedness, the bloodline of the armored razorback WYRM is far inferior to the lineage of us dragon blood warriors. Flying high in the air, Linley felt a sense of awe. Originally, Linley had drank a large amount of dragon's blood as well as eaten the draconic crystal of the armored razorback WYRM. But despite that, the dragon blood in Linley's vein had been able to dissolve and absorb it all. And now, upon entering the saint level, Linley could sense that the energy of the dragon blood heritage in his veins was continuing to transform and strengthen various functions in his body. "My speed has doubled, at least." With but a thought, Linley suddenly transformed into a blur as he streaked across the sky. As for defenses, Linley looked at his now perfect, undamaged scales, paying special attention to that dim layer of blue light. "If I were to take another blow from that four-winged angel, I would at most suffer some light wound." Linley's lips curved upwards. Confidence. Unmatchable confidence. Actually, most human saint-level experts had very weak defense. Even experts of the peak stage saint rank had far inferior defense compared to saint-level magical beasts. But the four supreme warriors possessed talents and gifts that were even more freakishly powerful than that of magical beasts. This was one of the reasons why, as soon as a dragon blood warrior reached the saint level in human form, they would immediately be at the peak stage of the saint level in power after dragon forming. They were invincible. Understanding and insight made no difference. Even just by relying on raw force, they were an invincible force amongst saint levels. This was their natural talent. Much like how Hera was jealous of how powerful Bebe had become, the four supreme warriors were worthy of admiration and jealousy from any race in the entire Yulon continent. "Boss!" Bebe leaped up into the air. Linley stretched his arm out, catching Bebe in mid-air, and Bebe jumped onto Linley's shoulders. Linley was now covered totally with dark scales, while on his shoulders there was a black shadow mouse. It really was quite a matching sight. Bebe, time for you to experience the flight speed of a true saint-level expert. Linley laughed loudly, then exerted himself to his utmost, transforming into a black blur as he streaked across the skies, disappearing into the horizon. The snow continued to fall across the night-shrouded wilderness. Only the corpses on the ground gave testament to the battle that had been fought here. The straight-line flying speed of a saint level was extremely fast. In an hour, Linley was able to cross over 1,000 kilometers. In a very short period of time, Linley saw Cloud Peak's village up ahead. Tonight, the snow-covered Cloud Peak's village was very quiet. Linley flew directly to the western side of the village, dropping down at high speed like a meteor as he landed into the middle of the courtyard. Who comes? A low roar as several shadows flashed out. Linley had been flying so fast that he had been creating sonic booms. Naturally, he attracted the attention of experts such as the Barker brothers. But once they saw that the person in front of them was the dragon-formed Linley, they all secretly sighed. HRM, you entered without even opening the door. The fifth brother, Gates, said in astonishment, then he stared at Linley. Lord, could it be that? Laughing, Linley glanced at Gates. Gates was the most intelligent and mentally agile of the five brothers, and was the first one to grasp the concept of wielding something heavy as though it were light. Ah! Saint level! The others now realized as well, and the five brothers stared at Linley in astonishment. Big brother Lay returned. Jen's voice rang out, as she ran out as well. But as she saw Linley's transformed appearance, she was so scared that she immediately screamed, "Monster!" Rebecca and Lena, who shared the room with her, quickly consoled her. Jen, that's Big Brother Linley. That's his dragon blood warrior transformation. Rebecca laughed. Linley returned to his normal human form. Badly frightened just now, Jen stared stupidly at the transformation, then looked at Rebecca. Dragon blood warrior? What's a dragon blood warrior? Haha, dragon blood warriors are one of the 4 supreme warriors. We 5 brothers are also supreme warriors. We are the undying warriors. Gates said arrogantly. Jen looked at the surrounding group of people. When she had arrived here tonight with Haru, she temporarily took up residence with Rebecca and Lena. But when Rebecca and Lena were introducing everyone to her, they had only gotten around to introducing Zisler. Jen hadn't even finished getting over her amazement at hearing that Zisler was an archmagus necromancer before, suddenly, this dragon blood warrior and these undying warrior concepts popped up as well. This, you all are, Jen's mind was in chaos. Jen, go back and get some rest. Linley laughed as he spoke. Barker and his brothers were all stunned by Linley's breakthrough. The second brother, Ankin K, laughed helplessly. Lord, you broke through at such speed. Big brother Barker has reached the saint level as well, but still wasn't your match. Now, the difference between us has increased even more. If he wasn't powerful, would he be our Lord, and lead us against the Radiant Church to seek vengeance? Gates said arrogantly. All of you are close to having the power of the saint level. Zisler's face had a smile on it. Fortunately, this old fogey has finally gained some certain insights. I trust that within 10 years, I should be able to break through and reach the saint level. 10 years? Zisler was over 800 years old. To him, 10 years was a fairly short period of time. A Grand Magus Necromancer? That is an incredibly terrifying idea. Linley's eyes shone. By that time, you'll be able to summon saint-level undead, and lead an army of millions of undead. An Archmagus Necromancer of the 9th rank was already very frightening. But a Grand Magus Necromancer was as terrifying as an entire empire, all by himself. Haha, everyone, keep growing stronger. F***ck, does the Radiant Church still dare send people over? If they send 1, we'll kill 1. If they send 10, we'll kill 10. Then we'll let Zisler create undead slaves out of their corpses and use them to counterattack. As Gates spoke, he grew excited over his idea. Everyone was very happy. Their strength increasing meant that they were now becoming more qualified to fight head-on against the Radiant Church. Linley was very happy as well. Raising his head towards the sky, watching the snow drift about, Linley then turned his gaze to everyone present. "All right, there's a blizzard tonight. Everyone should go inside the main hall if we want to chat. Right. Tonight, we won't stop until we are all drunk." Even the reliable and steady Barker was roaring loudly in his happiness. The party went on for half the night. In truth, whether or not they would be able to fight against the Radiant Church depended entirely on their power. The reason Linley was their leader was because he was the most powerful amongst them. Time passed. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had gone by. Jen had grown to fully understand everyone's background, and she slowly came to accept it all. Only now did Jen truly understand that to these people, the city governor of a prefectural city was nothing at all. In fact, not just a prefectural city, even the mighty Jacques clan, the rulers of the Northwest Administrative Province, didn't trouble Linley's group. They only viewed the Jacques clan as equals, and that only because of the existence of Mackenzie. Barker, his brothers, and big brother Linley are also hard-working. Rebecca, Lena, and Jen, these 3 beautiful ladies, were chatting amongst themselves while carrying baskets through the manor. But just as they entered the courtyard, they suddenly saw the Shadow Mouse, Bebe, floating in mid-air. Seeing Jen and the others, he winked flirtatiously towards the 3 of them. Bebe opened his mouth, and out of it came crisp, clear human speech. "Wow, 3 pretty girls. Hello, ladies." Book 8, The 10,000 Kilometer Journey Chapter 51, Warden. The imperial capital of the O'Brien Empire. Chan-Chi-Yan. In the entire Yulon continent, perhaps only the capital of the Yulon Empire could match Chan in terms of size. As for the name Chan, the war god O'Brien himself had chosen this name. The imperial capital, Chan. There were millions of residents living here. As a capital with over 5,000 years of history, Chan had many ancient clans. In a place such as the imperial capital of Chan, even experts of the 9th rank were quite common. No one dared to act rashly in the imperial capital, because there were far too many powerful clans here. But of course, the number 1 power of the imperial capital of Chan was, without a doubt, the War God's College. Although the personally taught disciples of the war god virtually never showed their faces, even the weakest of the honorary disciples were at least warriors of the 8th rank, while most were warriors of the 9th rank. From this, one could tell how astonishingly powerful the war god's college was. And of course, there was the master of the war god's college. The war god himself. It must be understood that in the O'Brien Empire, all other religions were outlawed. Even the commoners prayed to the war god. The war god had become the object of their faith. From this, one could tell how important the war god was in the hearts of the commoners. The east part of the imperial capital of Chan was a place covered with palaces and noble residences, with the imperial palace located within the east city as well. Within East Chan there was a street named Boulder Street, and on each side of Boulder Street there were meticulously constructed manors. These were all built by the order of the imperial clan of the empire, and were given as rewards to the nobles and government officials who had rendered great deeds unto the empire. One of the manors on Boulder Street was the residence of the newest rising star of the empire, Count Warden. 2 sturdy guards stood at each side of the gate to his residence, their waists stiff. And right now, within the main hall of the manor, there were 4 people. All 4 of them were standing, but one of them was pacing about, a hint of a frown appearing on his brows. He seemed to be roughly 21 or 22 years old. He wore a simple warrior's outfit, with the sleeveless outfit totally revealing his bulging muscles. He had a straight nose, thick black eyebrows, and a blocky, angular face, making him look very courageous and fierce. But the most astonishing thing about him was his body. He had the astonishing height of 2.2 meters. He had massively broad shoulders, a comparatively narrow waist, and two-toned, powerful legs. Just by looks, Warden does seem to be more astonishing than Linley, Hillman said to himself. Compared to Warden, Linley appeared to be more reserved and understated. Young Master Warden, are you still worrying about the seventh princess? Housekeeper Hyrie, his nose red from drinking wine, began to chortle. Warden turned to look at him helplessly. Grandpa Hyrie, you know who those people chasing after Nina are? The other young man in the group of four laughed. Young Master Warden, why has a bold, forthright man such as yourself become so squeamish and nervous when it comes to matters of love? Why don't you just go with her to meet with His Imperial Majesty? Isn't that simple? Just go directly. Warden raised an eyebrow. Hillman encouraged as well, Nader and Ada is right. You are already a warrior of the 8th rank, and the scion of the Dragon Blood Warrior clan. His Imperial Majesty surely knows that for a scion of the Dragon Blood Warrior clan to reach the 8th rank means that he definitely has been able to train in Dragon Blood Battle Chi, and has the ability to transform. As Hillman saw it, for someone to reach the 8th rank without training in Battle Chi was virtually impossible. But Hillman had no idea that right now, by Linley's side, there were 5 brothers who had reached the 8th rank just based on physical training. Warden, as a Dragon Blood Warrior, you are a fit and qualified match to wed the 7th princess. I trust His Imperial Majesty will agree. Housekeeper Hyrie laughed as he spoke. But as for asking for her hand, I think it might be better if you let the 7th princess to sound His Imperial Majesty out first. That way, you'll have a better idea going in. Housekeeper Hyrie and Hillman glanced at each other, then both of them began to laugh. In the past year or two, the relationship between Warden and the 7th princess of the Empire had become quite well known throughout the entire imperial capital. Only, the other young nobles of the imperial capital had refused to give up. What's more, 2 of them were quite competitive. Enough of that for now. Warden shook his head. He trusted the 7th princess. The 7th princess had already told him long ago that aside from him, she wouldn't marry anyone else. But Warden also knew that the marriage of an imperial princess of the Empire was not up to her alone to decide. In addition, Warden didn't want the 7th princess to be too frustrated and unhappy. If he could openly wed her, that would be for the best. Oh, right. Grandpa Hyrie, any news of my big brother? Warden asked. Housekeeper Hyrie nodded. The Dawson conglomerate has sent word that your big brother remains hidden in seclusion, where he continues to train. There's no special news. Big brother is as hard-working as ever. In his heart, Warden admired Linley very much. Many of the weighty responsibilities of the Dragon Blood Warrior clan, such as the reclaiming of their ancestral heirloom, or the avenging their parents' deaths, had been shouldered by Linley alone. As for him, Warden, he could remain here in the imperial capital and quietly train. Even from afar, Linley continued to shield him from the wind and the rain. Big brother, Warden still remembered how when he was young, when those 2 saint-level combatants were doing battle outside Wushan Township, those boulders had rained down densely from the skies. His big brother had ignored his own safety to cover Warden with his own body. Warden could clearly remember that dangerous moment. Get down! Linley had angrily shouted at Warden, while charging towards him with no regard for his own safety. Linley had used his own weak, frail body to shield Warden. After leaving home at the age of 6, Warden was now 22 years old. In another month, he would be 23. It had been almost 17 years. He hadn't seen his sibling in 17 years. Young Master Warden, don't worry too much. Young Master Linley will come find you once his training reaches a certain level. After all, he knows exactly where you are living. Housekeeper Hyrie said consolingly. Warden nodded, then chuckled at himself. When Big Brother sees me, I wonder if he'll still recognize me. The little 6-year-old kid has changed quite a bit. Haha, it's true that your big brother might not recognize you. Hillman began to laugh. Nader nodded as well. When I came along with my father from the Holy Union, I initially couldn't recognize you either, young Master Warden. It was only after I saw Housekeeper Hyrie did I realize that this big fellow who was even taller than me was actually that little kid I used to know. Nader, you punk! Warden glared at him. Nader was Hillman's son. However, Nader didn't have much talent as a warrior, although he was already 25 years old. Nader was only a warrior of the 4th rank. But Nader was extremely discreet and careful, and so alongside his father Hillman, he managed and oversaw the work of all the guards of the manor. Whoa, it's getting late. Warden took out a pocket watch and cast it a glance. Grandpa Hyrie, Uncle Hillman, I need to head out. He must be meeting up with the 7th princess again. Nader snickered, intentionally putting a smirk on his face. Warden laughed confidently towards Nader. Naturally. What, are you jealous? As he spoke, Warden chortled as he walked out of the manor. Watching Warden leave, Housekeeper Hyrie felt very moved. When we came, young Master Warden was just a child. But now, he's all grown up. I have fulfilled the task Lord Hogg gave me. When he thought of Hogg, Hyrie couldn't stop sighing. The Barrack clan has been slumbering for many years. But now, it has finally begun to awaken. In another 10 years, most likely the entire Yulon continent will once again be filled with people discussing the legendary Dragon Blood Warriors. Hillman said confidently. Carrying the Warblade Slaughterer, Warden rode on a saber-toothed tiger on the streets. Saber-toothed tigers were magical beasts of the 8th rank, and thus their aura would make ordinary magical beasts cower away from it. What's more, Warden was so physically huge himself. Together, they posed such a terrifying sight that everyone who saw him felt dread. Thus, the pedestrians on the street all made way for him. That's the genius student of the O'Brien Academy, Warden. Look! He's riding a magical beast of the 8th rank. Saber-toothed tiger. How fierce! If I had a magical beast of my own, how great that would be! Many people on the streets chatted about Warden as he passed by. In the past, when Linley had seen that Velocidragon for the first time, he too had dreamed of having a powerful magical beast like a Velocidragon for his companion. In the eyes of many youths, Warden was their role model. Saber-toothed tigers were extremely fast. Even when traveling on the streets, it moved forward very rapidly and very nimbly. Here we are. Warden saw that magnificent hotel from far away. This was the appointed meeting spot for him and the 7th princess. The receptionist for the hotel recognized Warden as well, and immediately opened the door for Warden to enter. Leading the saber-toothed tiger behind him, Warden entered the hotel. Warden looked around the hotel, his gaze finally settling on the person he cared about the most. He immediately called out happily, "Nina!" But just at this moment, Warden suddenly frowned, because he also once again saw the person who irritated him. Warden! Nina had a head of full, lustrous blonde hair, and her pale face was as charming as ever. Her brilliant, shining eyes didn't have a single hint of impurity in them. Nina ran over happily towards Warden, who immediately stepped forward, taking Nina by the hand. "That guy is bothering me again," Nina whispered to Warden. Warden glanced at the distant man, saying in a low voice, "Nina, don't pay any attention to that guy." But just at that moment, the handsome young man walked over. With a calm laugh, he said, "Warden, I really didn't expect to see you here. Why is it that you always appear wherever Nina is?" "Shut your mouth, La Montlan Mo. Warden frowned. "Remember, Nina's name isn't for the likes of you to call out. And also, the question you asked me, I should be asking you. Why is it that wherever Nina is, you always appear?" Lamont glanced at Warden, a smile that was not a smile on his face. Although on the surface, he didn't seem to care much, in his heart, Lamont really disliked this Warden. After all, it was Warden who had taken Nina away from him. "Oh, a saber-toothed tiger. Lamont looked at Warden's saber-toothed tiger. Laughing, he said, "Warden, any interest in letting my blue-eyed tiger mastiff have a fight with your saber-toothed tiger? I'll wager that my blue-eyed tiger mastiff would definitely win." Blue-eyed tiger mastiffs and saber-toothed tigers were both magical beasts of the 8th rank. However, there were differences in power amongst magical beasts of the 8th rank as well. For example, gold-mane mastiffs and blue-eyed tiger mastiffs were considered one of the top kinds of magical beasts of the 8th rank. Blue-eyed tiger mastiffs were particularly effective against tiger-type magical beasts. Not interested. Warden paid his suggestion no heed at all. Looking coldly at Lamont, Warden said, "Lamont, if you really want to have a competition, I wouldn't object to having a sparring match against you. As for having magical beasts compete? HRMPH. A competition between men." Lamont chuckled, then no longer said anything. He, Lamont, was an honorary disciple of the War Gods College, and he was a warrior of the 9th rank. He was indeed qualified to be arrogant. But right now, virtually all of the ancient clans of the Imperial City knew that Warden was of the Barak clan, which in turn was the clan of the Dragon Blood Warriors. And Warden was clearly able to use battle chi. A scion of the Dragon Blood Warrior clan who could use battle chi was definitely capable of dragon forming as well. Lamont knew very well that although Warden appeared to be only a warrior of the 8th rank, when using that unique, special warblade of his to attack, he could fight on par with ordinary warriors of the 9th rank. But once Warden transformed, he, Lamont, wouldn't be a match at all. "Let's leave." Gently stroking the head of his blue-eyed tiger mastiff, Lamont chuckled lightly. And then, Lamont left along with his magical beast, just like that. Nina and Warden headed directly to a private deluxe room on the second room of the hotel. As for Nina's female attendant, she stayed outside the room. "You big lunk, tell me, what should we do about that Lamont? He is so annoying." Nina nestled in Warden's arms, asking in a soft voice. "Big lunk." This was how Nina had addressed Warden the first time they had met. Whenever they met in private, this was how Nina would address him. "It is your own fault for being so charming, Nina." Warden grinned as he tweaked Nina's nose. "Actually, I don't care too much about that Lamont fellow. The one I'm worried about is Kailan. Big brother Kailan." Nina said with resignation, "I only think of him as a big brother, but he, sigh." Kailan was 23 years old, but was already a magus of the 7th rank. There were quite a few 23-year-old warriors of the 7th rank, but very few 23-year-old magi of the 7th rank. Moreover, Kailan had reached the 7th rank as a magus when he was 21 years old. If Linley hadn't sculpted Awakening from the Dream, most likely it would have taken him until the age of 20 to reach the 7th rank. In the imperial capital, Kailan was considered a genius magus. He had been childhood friends with Nina. And more importantly, Kailan's father was the left premier of the empire, an extremely powerful man. Kailan himself was, simply put, a very good person as well. It could be said that he was a nearly perfect individual. Book 8, The 10,000 Kilometer Journey Chapter 52, The Beirut Clan. In terms of lineage as well as personality, Kailan is a fine man. Warden held Nina in his arms, speaking softly. "I'm afraid that your imperial father will give your hand in marriage to Kailan." Nina nodded. It is true that imperial father values Kailan due to his high talent for magic. In the future, he has a high chance of becoming an archmagus of the 9th rank, and even has a chance to become a saint-level grand magus. The empire has many saint-level experts, but most of them are saint-level warriors. There are extremely few saint-level grand magi. Warden sensed that Kailan was a threat. Although Lamont belonged to the War Gods College, he was just an honorary disciple. In addition, his clan wasn't particularly powerful either. He, Warden, was a dragon blood warrior after all. As long as the Emperor wasn't a fool, he would definitely select Warden. But if Kalen were to compete against Warden, things would be different. His father was, after all, the powerful and influential left premier of the empire. Nina. Warden became very solemn. HRM. Nestled in Warden's arms, Nina looked up at him. I am preparing to request an audience with His Imperial Majesty, and to personally ask for him to give me your hand in marriage. Warden said with a very solemn expression on his face. Nina started, and then a look of wild joy appeared on her face. Truly. Nina was very excited. Yes. Warden nodded. Nina, before I do so, you can chat with your imperial father and get a sense of which way the wind is blowing. Nina shook her head helplessly. I thought I told you already. My imperial father himself has yet to make up his mind. The only thing he says is, no rush, but my imperial father does have a very favorable impression of you, and he values you as well. If you really were to ask for my hand, I think your chances would be very high. Nina was very hopeful. Only one of her older sisters had married someone whom she loved. For the rest of Nina's sisters, their marriages were marriages of political convenience, and not very happy ones. Warden nodded slightly. Don't worry, Nina. I won't let anyone take you from me. Warden tightly embraced Nina, who placed her head against Warden's massive, sturdy chest. The Northwest Administrative Province. Cloud Peaks Village, outside the provincial capital. On the west side of Cloud Peaks Village, there was a forest. The already dragon-formed Linley was currently sparring with Bebe. Bebe, don't force me. Linley said helplessly as he wielded the adamantine heavy sword. If you keep doing this to me, then I'll be forced to use the profound truths of the earth. Boss, I know you care about me too much to do that to me. Bebe was hovering in midair, speaking in the human tongue. Upon reaching the saint level, magical beasts could freely alter their size, and also speak in human tongues. But only a deity-level magical beast could transform into a human shape. In the entire Yulon continent, only the King of the Forest of Darkness and the King of the Mountain Range of Magical Beasts, these two powerful deity-level experts, could transform into a human form. As for Bebe, who knew how long it would be before he could reach such a level. You rascal! Linley sighed. I reached the saint level and finally caught up to you in terms of speed and defense. But you immediately entered the saint level as well. Your speed became even more ridiculous. But movement speed and attack speed remained two different concepts. The speed of swinging a sword was far faster than movement speed. Although in terms of dodging and agility, Linley was no match for Bebe, his adamantine heavy sword was still able to block Bebe's attacks. Thus, facing Bebe, Linley usually just stood there, using his sword to defend himself. Bebe laughed proudly. Actually, Linley's profound truths of the earth still posed a real threat to Bebe. After all, the profound truths of the earth all but ignored external defenses, rendering Bebe's powerful defense useless. But how could Linley bear to use such a vicious attack against Bebe? Thus, Bebe continuously teased and taunted Linley in their spars. Enough! My body has 2 claw marks on it now. Are you happy? Linley laughed as he rubbed Bebe's little head. Let's go back. It's time to eat. As he spoke, Linley reverted to his human form, then put on a new set of clothes. The boss is always the best. Bebe flew to Linley's shoulders and giggled. In Linley's current squad, if Linley were to avoid using the profound truths of the earth, there was no one here who was a match for Bebe. Bebe was a truly powerful saint-level magical beast, through and through. Bebe, what sort of magical beast are you, exactly? Linley walked while chatting with Bebe. I really don't know either. Bebe rapidly shook his little head. Linley suddenly remembered something, then looked towards Bebe in astonishment. Bebe, do you remember back when we initiated our bond of equals, I asked you what your name was? At that time you said, Be. You didn't say whatever it was you wanted to say very clearly. Linley remembered that scene very clearly. Little Shadow Mouse, what is your name? Linley had mentally asked him. The little Shadow Mouse had said, somewhat excitedly, Bay, Bay. Linley had stared at the little Shadow Mouse. What's the little Shadow Mouse saying? Linley didn't really understand. His white beard flowing, Doring Coward had floated next to him and mentally said, Linley, this little Shadow Mouse is still an infant. He can't form precise sounds yet. Even when engaging in mental communication with you, for now, he can only communicate simple intentions. Due to their spiritual link, Linley had been able to feel the little Shadow Mouse's excitement, but the little Shadow Mouse simply couldn't speak at all. Okay. You were saying Bay. Bay, then I'm going to call you Bay Bay. How's that? Linley had grinned as he watched the little Shadow Mouse. The little Shadow Mouse had seemed to ponder for a while, and then had happily nodded. And just like that, Linley had named him Bay Bay. Did I say that? Bay Bay was startled. Oh, right. Bay Bay remembered. I remember now. When I was very, very young, so young that I couldn't even open my eyes, I heard a very close, very warm voice speak to me. Linley immediately looked at Bay Bay. He had never heard Bay Bay speak of this before. It was normal for magical beasts to be unable to open their eyes soon after they were born. At that time, Bay Bay most likely had just been born not long ago. That was a very distant memory. If Linley hadn't brought it up, Bay Bay wouldn't have recalled it either. That voice told me that I belonged to some clan. It instructed me to hide in the back courtyard of your clan's manor and to not run around. And then, the voice disappeared. Bay Bay was very puzzled. The Bay something clan? Linley said questioningly. I don't recall very well. It seems to have been Bay, Bay, oh. Bibi's little eyes lit up. Beirut Bay-Lute. Right. It seems to have been Beirut. That voice told me that I was a member of the mighty Beirut clan. It told me not to run around, because it was dangerous outside. That's why I stayed in your manor's back courtyard the entire time, boss, as I slowly grew up there. Linley now understood. The Beirut clan. Linley was puzzled. Magical beasts have clans. Bay Bay shook his head in confusion as well. I don't know either. I never met my parents after I was born. I just stayed at the back courtyard of your clan's manor, and all I had to eat were those pieces of rubble. Linley firmly imprinted this name into his memory, the Beirut clan. Linley was absolutely certain that he had never heard of any powerful clan in the Yulon continent named Beirut. But this clan was most likely a magical beast clan. A magical beast clan? Linley didn't know about it because he was not a magical beast. But Bay Bay didn't know either, because he had no parents. 10 more days passed for Linley within Cloud Peak's village. Per Linley's agreement with Mackenzie, all he had to do was make a single trip to visit the Jacques clan within 30 days. Big brother Linley, you have a letter. Jen ran in excitedly from outside. Oh, it should be from the Dawson conglomerate. The Dawson conglomerate sent a letter every month. Linley immediately walked out. There was a young man leading a horse outside. Upon seeing Linley, the young man immediately bowed and said courteously, Lord Lay, here is your letter. Linley accepted the letter and laughed. Next month, there will be no need for you to come here. The young man looked at Linley questioningly. By this time next month, I will no longer be here. Linley had made the decision long ago that in the next few days, he would head to the Jacques clan. His wounds had healed long ago, and after dragon forming, he was a saint-level combatant. It was time to go visit his little brother. It had been a long, long time since he had met with Warden. In his heart, Linley had always missed this one and only sibling of his. Yes, Lord Lay. The young man said respectfully, and then he mounted his horse and left. As for Linley, he opened the letter and read it. The letter had quite a good amount of general information regarding the current state of affairs for the Radiant Church and the Yulon continent as a whole. It also had some information about Reynolds, George, and Yale. At the bottom was information regarding Warden. George is really formidable. Linley mentally sighed in praise. With the support of the Walsh family, George had continued on his upward trajectory within the Yulon Empire. He himself was very talented as well, but more importantly, the third prince of the Yulon Empire had successfully inherited the imperial throne, becoming the emperor of the Yulon Empire. Prior to the third prince assuming the position of emperor, George had been on very close terms with him. The two of them were politically of one mind. Now that the third prince had succeeded his father as emperor, George had become the youngest grand secretary in the Yulon Empire. The entire Yulon Empire only had 12 grand secretaries. Each of them possessed extraordinary power and authority. What's more, George was also the deputy for the right premier of the Yulon Empire. By comparison, Reynolds hasn't done as well as George. Linley chuckled, then he closely read the information regarding Warden. Linley had a general idea of what Warden was up to. But upon reading the letter, what? Linley was shocked. Warden has asked the Emperor for the 7th princess's hand in marriage. The Dawson conglomerate had just transmitted this news to the provincial capital of Basel not long ago. After all, this event only happened a few days ago. The Emperor didn't agree. Frowning, Linley continued to read. Fortunately, although he didn't agree, he didn't refuse too harshly either. According to the letter, the Emperor was continuing to delay. That Lamont had gone long ago to ask the same question, and the Emperor hadn't agreed then either. Now that Warden had gone, the Emperor still declined to agree. What he said was, "Nina is still young. There is no rush." Nina was already 21 years old. She wasn't that young. But Nina was both a magus and a warrior, and her affinity as a magus was to water magic, which was of exceeding benefit to one's body. Nina's lifespan would definitely be very long. It would be easy for her to live for 300 or 400 years. Given this, it was true that she did not need to be in a rush to marry. One is the son of the left premier of the empire, while the other is an honorary disciple of the War Gods College. Linley could immediately tell who his younger brother's greatest adversary was. It was the left premier's son, that magus named Kalen. It seems as though the situation isn't looking good. Linley's forehead was furrowed. A cold light flashed in his eyes. No matter what, I can't let Warden walk the same road that I did. Tomorrow, I'll go pay a visit to the Jacques clan. After satisfying the agreement, we'll head directly to the imperial capital. Linley had made his decision. But right at that moment, Lord, the familiar voice of Gates rang out. Gates was probably the most lively of the 5 brothers. Lord! It wasn't just Gates, the others were shouting as well. Puzzled, Linley returned to the courtyard. As he did, Gates and the others immediately rushed to him, their faces filled with wild joy. All of you are so happy. What's the good news? Linley laughed. Second brother has already reached the 9th rank. Gates was the first to speak. Ankh, our second brother, is at the same level as well after transforming. The third brother, Hazer, said with joy. Linley was startled. Of the 5 brothers, Barker was the first to reach the 9th rank. After he possessed the power of the saint level, the other 4 brothers, all at the peak of the 8th rank, continued to work hard. Unexpectedly, another one had reached the 9th rank so soon. Myself. Bebe. Barker. Ankh. All of a sudden, 4 of us have reached the saint level. Linley had never heard of a clan possessing 4 saint-level combatants. The scariest part of it was, the other 3 brothers could break through at any moment as well. Linley had no idea, but he was grinning so widely that his lips threatened to split apart. Perhaps the very next day, someone would come running over to tell him that another one of the 5 brothers had broken through. They would then have yet another saint level in their ranks. Linley now felt all the more convinced that his decision to go rescue Barker and his brothers was an absolutely genius decision. By now, aside from Barker and Ankh, the other 3 brothers could be considered saint levels in the making. Book 8, The 10,000 Kilometer Journey Chapter 53, Guest. Living in the Northwest Administrative Province, it could be said that Linley had gotten everything he had desired. In the blink of an eye, he, Bebe, and the second brother, Ankh, had all reached the saint level of power. Their group now had 4 saint-level experts. Even the 3 major trading unions or the 4 major assassins' guilds couldn't boast such a number. This was an extremely powerful, hidden force. Unfortunately, in the imperial capital, the opposite was true for Warden. In the spacious training area in the back part of the manor, Warden was wildly training with his ancestral heirloom, the Warblade Slaughterer. Sweat was pouring down from every part of his body, but it seemed as though Warden didn't feel tired at all, as he continued to train. Watching quietly, housekeeper Hyrie shook his head to himself. Warden is just like his father. He cares too much about love. Hyrie had watched Hogg grow up, and knew how deep a love Hogg had felt for Linley's mother, Lena. When Lena had been abducted, Hogg had been in misery for over 10 years. The only reason he had endured was because he had to raise Linley and Warden. As soon as Hogg felt that Linley and Warden could grow up on their own, he threw away everything to investigate his wife's whereabouts. In the end, he paid for it with his life. Warden is the same. His Imperial Majesty didn't totally cut off all his hopes. He only asked Warden not to be in such a rush, and that there was no need for the 7th princess to marry so soon. But Warden has become like this, Hyrie kept on sighing. Housekeeper Hyrie didn't know that it wasn't just Hogg and Warden who were like this. Linley was the same as well. Growl. After this bestial growl, Warden slowly stopped brandishing the warblade in his hands. After having painstakingly trained for so many years, Warden had already reached a very high level of proficiency with the warblade. The bestial roar that came out just now was one of the hallmarks of the warblade style he had developed. Grandpa Hyrie. Warden looked at housekeeper Hyrie, squeezing a smile onto his face. After having unleashed all of his frustrations just now, Warden felt a bit better inside. Warden, don't be too sad. You and the 7th princess still have a chance. Hyrie laughed. I think the reason His Imperial Majesty has been delaying is because it is very hard for him to choose between you and Kaelin. Warden nodded. Warden actually understood a great deal about the current emperor. He was an emperor that highly valued human talent, and he was a fairly decisive man as well. But he had one flaw. That flaw was bias. Extreme bias. Everyone in the imperial capital knew this. For example, 20 years ago, the Southeast Administrative Province's managing clan had made some mistakes. Since they didn't have the backing of a saint-level expert, in the end, their clan was ransacked by the emperor. At the time, many clans had desired to take over the Southeast Administrative Province. But in the end, the emperor had actually given his one and only younger brother, Duke Julin Yulin, authority over the Southeast Administrative Province. Anyone the emperor was close to, he tended to be biased towards. Kaelin's father, the imperial left premier, Jud Daryl Juda de Leer, had grown up alongside the emperor. They were on very good terms with each other. After the emperor took the throne, he naturally appointed Jud Daryl to a high rank, eventually appointing him the imperial left premier. He possessed enormous power, and could be described to be second to only the emperor himself. The emperor, being on such close terms with the imperial left premier, naturally was very partial and protective towards Kaelin as well. In addition, Kaelin was a very talented, worthy person. It would have been very natural for the emperor to agree to Kaelin's attempt to woo Nina. However, Warden was also wooing Nina, and Nina herself liked Warden. This made the emperor hesitate. Kaelin and Warden were both very talented. He doted on Coiling, but he also doted on Nina. Coiling's father was his dear friend and was one of the pillars of the empire. But Warden was a dragon blood warrior. This was a very hard choice to make. I understand what His Imperial Majesty is thinking. For him to refuse my direct request to be allowed to wed Nina means that it will not be so easy for the two of us to be together. Warden sighed. Warden, you need to have some self-confidence. Housekeeper Hyrie encouraged. Warden forced out a smile. Grandpa Hyrie, I know what the situation is. In the Empire, His Imperial Majesty's decree is absolute law. The only person he is afraid of is the war god himself. That's why I originally took part in the competition to become an honorary disciple. I wanted to build a relationship with the war god. So long as the war god was willing to assist me, everything would have been set. The war god. The true foundation and pillar of the O'Brien Empire. A single word from the war god could make the emperor abdicate without daring to say a word of complaint. After all, the war god was the founding emperor of the O'Brien Empire, and he was also a deity-level expert who stood at the top of the entire Yulon continent. Slowly, slowly. Don't be in a rush. Housekeeper Hyrie consoled. Lord Count, the 7th princess has arrived. An attendant walked into the training grounds and said respectfully. Nina came. Warden was very surprised. Although the two were on very close terms, Nina rarely came to visit him at his manor. Warden immediately took a quick rinse, changed into a fresh set of clothes, then went to the main hall to see Nina. Within the main hall, a look of happiness was on Nina's face. The female attendant behind her laughed quietly. Princess, what sort of expression do you think the Lord Count will have on his face when he hears this news? What sort of expression the big lunk will have? Nina pondered the question, her laughter becoming all the merrier. As she thought and chatted, Nina suddenly heard footsteps. Turning, she saw a large, powerful figure walk in, as tall and strong as a war god. Staring at this familiar figure, Nina felt a sweet feeling in her heart. In her heart, Warden had already become her mental pillar of support. Nina, why have you come to my place? Aren't you afraid your imperial father will scold you? Warden laughed as he walked in. Nina pouted. He can scold me if he wants. I wanted to come. Seeing the adorable look on Nina's face, Warden felt a gentle, warm feeling in his heart. He sat next to Nina and held her hands. Nina, judging from the look on your face, I think you are hiding something from me. Nina wrinkled her nose, saying delightedly, I can't hide anything from you. I want to tell you some good news. Good news? What good news? Has your imperial father changed his mind and decided to allow me to marry you? Warden said casually. The emperor's words were as good as gold. How could he so casually take back what he had said? Of course not. Nina's smile was very bright. Then what is it? Nina's expression grew solemn. 2 days ago, you spoke with my imperial father, but he didn't agree. I felt very unhappy, so I thought of something. I went directly to Big Brother Coiling. You went to find Coiling? Warden's eyebrows shot up. Coiling was his enemy in love. What did you go find him for? Nina giggled. Okay, stop guessing. I just went to have a good chat with Big Brother Coiling. I told him that the only thing I felt for him was the affection due an older brother. We grew up together, and he really was like an older brother to me. I asked Big Brother Coiling to help the two of us. I told Big Brother Coiling that if I were to leave you, Warden, I wouldn't be able to live. Warden suddenly felt deeply moved. Big Brother Coiling was quiet for a long time, but in the end, he agreed that he would speak to His Imperial Majesty, and that he would abandon his pursuit of me and allow us to be together. Nina's smile was incandescent. Coiling is giving up. Warden was shocked. Warden had been in the imperial capital for a long time now, and had interacted with Coiling several times. Warden could clearly sense the love which Coiling felt towards Nina. He was totally, truly in love with her. And yet, Kaelin had decided to give up. Warden felt very moved, while at the same time, he began to somewhat admire Kaelin. Big brother Kaelin has given up, while the others aren't much of a threat. As for that Lamont, in my imperial father's heart, he can't compare to you. A very happy look was on Nina's face. Big Lunk, there's no one who can stop us from being together now. Excitement. There was no way he could stop this sense of excitement and joy from swelling in his heart. The most troublesome, headache-inducing competitor facing him had voluntarily given up. This sort of sudden, unexpected joy made Warden feel a little giddy and dizzy. Staring at Nina's incandescent smile, Warden felt more moved than he ever had been. Right. No one will prevent us from being together. Warden held Nina tightly in his arms. Linley, Bebe, Haru, Rebecca, Lena, Jen, Zisler, and Barker and his brothers left Cloud Peaks village, making their way towards the provincial capital of Basel. The provincial capital of Basel. The Jacques clan's castle. Linley's group had arrived at the gates. Who comes before us? The castle guards barked at them from far away. The Jacques clan were the local hegemons of the Northwest Administrative Province. Their headquarters wasn't a place where just anyone could enter. The fifth of the brothers, Gates, immediately shouted loudly, "Go inform Mackenzie that our Lord Linley has arrived." "Who is making so much noise outside?" a familiar voice shouted. Linley carefully stared in the direction of that voice. Indeed, that gaudily dressed young man, Albert, came rushing out amidst a number of servants. Seeing Linley's group, the look on Albert's face changed. "You are called Lay, right? How dare you come to my house?" A vicious, sinister look was on Albert's face. "I didn't expect that those 6 people belonging to the Radiant Church wouldn't be able to kill you. But my Jacques clan isn't so easily bullied by the likes of you." At the same time, Albert also noticed that behind Linley, there was Jen, as well as Rebecca and her sister. Jen's complexion was as beautiful as a flower petal in a pool of water, while Rebecca and Lena possessed a certain mysterious grace that was extremely mesmerizing. How the hell did this guy get so many beautiful women to follow him? Albert felt extremely aggrieved. "How dare you come to cause trouble at the gates of the Jacques clan? Men! Seize them!" Albert immediately ordered loudly. The surrounding guards all charged forward, but before Linley made a single move, Barker and his brothers charged forward. "Spare their lives," Linley said calmly. "Got it," Gates said excitedly. "As long as they don't die, right?" Barker's eyes held a hint of glee as well. These 5 brothers had been famous in the 18 northern duchies as bloodthirsty warlords. When leading their armies, they had killed countless people. These 5 enormous siblings were like war machines. They seized one guard after another, as easily as snatching up a chicken, and then casually tossed them like sandbags towards the castle gates. The force of these tosses by the Barker brothers was quite high. These warriors of the 5th and 6th ranks had their bones snapped as soon as they hit the ground. Albert was so angry that his entire body was quivering. "You are too arrogant and wild. You dare act like this in front of the Jacques clan. What is going on out here?" An angry roar could be heard, as another group of people appeared from within the castle. The leader was a middle-aged man with a square face. Albert immediately bowed. "Father, these people are causing trouble at our gates, and they even injured our guards." "Oh." This middle-aged man was the leader of the Jacques clan, Odin Ao Deng Jacques. Odin Jacques stared coldly at Linley's group. "Haha, brother Linley, you've arrived." A loud laugh could be heard as a blur suddenly descended from the heavens, appearing in front of the castle gates. "That stiff, ramrod straight back. That white-flecked hair." Odin and Albert, upon seeing this man, immediately dropped all pretenses of arrogance and immediately bowed respectfully. "Odin, what are you doing here?" Mackenzie looked coldly at Odin. Odin trembled, not daring to speak. He had heard how Mackenzie had just said the words, Brother Linley. He didn't dare say a word. This has nothing to do with this Odin fellow. Only, there's a small grudge between his son Albert and myself. Thus, he wanted to use the clan's forces to resolve our private issues. Linley said with a calm laugh. Grudge. Mackenzie nodded. Casting a single cold glance at Albert, Mackenzie turned to look at Odin. Odin, have Albert go to the prefectural city of Daco to assist his uncle. The provincial capital of Basel is no longer an appropriate place for him to stay. Albert's face instantly turned white. The provincial capital of Basel was no longer a suitable place for him to stay? This was as good as saying that his position as heir to the clan leadership had just been stripped from him. Moreover, he was being exiled to a prefectural city, and he wasn't even going to be the city governor, he was just going to assist his uncle. In the future, he wouldn't even be on Keen's level. Yes, grandfather. Odin didn't dare to hesitate in the slightest. In the Northwest Administrative Province, Mackenzie's stature was the same as the war god O'Brien's stature in the O'Brien Empire. Even if he wanted Odin to give up his position as clan leader, Odin wouldn't dare to voice a single word of complaint. Brother Linley, I am so very sorry. I was out for a stroll just now, and so I arrived here a bit late. Mackenzie warmly welcomed Linley into his castle. Smiling, Linley entered the castle alongside Mackenzie, with Odin courteously following them from behind. As for the pale-faced Albert, no one paid him any more attention. Book 8, The 10,000 Kilometer Journey Chapter 54, Personal Disciple. The Jacques clan's castle was extremely large, but virtually everyone in the castle knew that the quiet park that took up nearly a third of the castle was a restricted area. Because that was where Mackenzie lived. Aside from Mackenzie and his wife, only 3 attendants as well as Mackenzie's disciples were permitted to enter. Normally, even the clan leader or his sons had to be granted entry before entering. The quiet park was extremely large, and more than half of it was taken up by trees and flowers. The buildings inside the park were both simple and unadorned. But despite that, it would be easy for over 100 people to live within this place. Linley's group had been invited to enter the quiet park. A jade-haired, beautiful, virtuous-looking woman who seemed to be in her 30s guided Linley's group through the park, helping arrange places for them to live. Bliss by Lee Si, prepare a banquet, just like last time when Hatesun came to visit. Mackenzie said to the beautiful attendant. Yes, my lord. The jade-haired woman was very shocked. Mackenzie, when receiving guests, was very particular about how he treated them. Generally speaking, this high-class banquet which Mackenzie was now instructing to hold was generally only for saint-level combatants. Can this youngster be a saint-level expert? Bliss glanced at Linley, guessing silently. Mackenzie laughed towards Linley. Linley, although you've been in my Northwest Administrative Province for quite some time, I'll wager you have yet to try some of the true delicacies of the Northwest Administrative Province. True delicacies? Linley raised an eyebrow. When he was staying in the hotels, the dishes Linley had ordered were all very famous. After all, for someone at Linley's level, money was of no concern. Of course, the provincial capital has many restaurants with fine dishes. But there are some special dishes which even those finest of restaurants only prepare a single portion of each week. Those special delicacies are something that you can't simply buy with money. Mackenzie said proudly. Throughout his life, Mackenzie had only 2 hobbies, the first was training, and the second was sampling the various delicacies of the world. Mackenzie had even once said that if one didn't have the chance to eat rare foods, then one's life would have no flavor. Then today, I must have a good sampling of what you have to offer. Linley chuckled. Right now, only Linley and Mackenzie were in the main hall, as well as Bebe, who was standing on Linley's shoulders. As for Barker and his brothers, all of them had retired to their rooms. Seeing the shadow mouse on Linley's shoulders, Mackenzie seemed to be slightly surprised. Linley, I have the feeling that this magical beast of yours seems to be quite extraordinary. But he looks like a black shadow mouse. This, black shadow mice were the weakest type of shadow mice. But Mackenzie was certain that given Linley's status, there was no way he would have such a weak magical beast companion. Bebe had reached the saint level already. Currently, however, Bebe was totally suppressing his aura. If a saint-level combatant were to suppress their aura, unless the opponents were far stronger, they wouldn't be able to sense the exact power. Bebe is a peak stage magical beast of the 9th rank. Linley laughed. On Linley's shoulders, Bebe flashed his fangs disdainfully towards Mackenzie. As Linley planned it, Bebe having reached the saint rank was one of his most valuable hidden trump cards. Bebe was already extremely terrifying before reaching the saint rank. Now that he had reached the saint rank, if Linley didn't use the profound truths of the earth, he would be absolutely ravaged by Bebe in their sparring matches. But amongst saint-level experts, how many possessed such a strange attack as Linley's profound truths of the earth? Generally, saint-level experts weren't a match for Bebe at all. A black shadow mouse which is a peak stage magical beast of the 9th rank. Mackenzie was still very surprised. Enough about that. Mackenzie, in a few days, I plan to head off to the imperial capital. What do you think would be a good time for us to hold our sparring match? Linley asked. Leaving so soon? Mackenzie was a bit disappointed. I was hoping to celebrate with you for quite a while, brother Linley. That way, when we sparred together, we would learn more as well. But since you have business to attend to in the imperial capital, then, how about this? In 3 days, let's have our sparring match in that small desolate mountain outside the city. Works for me. Linley nodded in agreement. Come take a look at my training yard. Mackenzie said warmly, and Linley followed Mackenzie over to take a look. While Linley was enjoying the warm hospitality of Mackenzie, Warden and Nina had left the imperial capital and were headed for the War Gods College. The War Gods College was built on top of a tall mountain. The mountain was thus named, War God Mountain. It has already been over 200 years since the last time the War God accepted a personal disciple. A few years ago, the prodigy sword saint, Olivier, refused the War God's invitation. I didn't expect that he would suddenly declare that he would accept another personal disciple. If one day, I could become his personal disciple, even if it were just for a day, I would die a happy man. The road outside the imperial capital was filled with people, all chatting and calling out to each other. The War Gods College accepting new honorary disciples was no longer an issue of major interest. Accepting a new personal disciple, however, was an earth-shaking event. The importance of such an event was not one whit less than a new emperor assuming the throne. After all, in the past 5,000 years, the war god O'Brien had only accepted a total of 20 or so personal disciples. Many of them were already deceased. As for emperors, in the past 5,000 years, there had been over 100 of them. Although in the hearts of the commoners, this was a huge affair, the War Gods College method of carrying the recruiting of a personal disciple was very simple. When the time came, they would simply send out a public announcement of who the next personal disciple would be. The designated time was today at noon. And thus, early this morning, a large number of people had come to congregate outside War God Mountain. Warden and Nina naturally went to watch this momentous event as well. Within their carriage, Big Lunk, who do you think will become the next personal disciple of the war god? Nina asked. Even in the eyes of an imperial princess, the war god was high and far above them, someone who they could never approach. Since she was born, Nina had never seen the war god once. In fact, not even the current reigning emperor, Johann Qiaoan, had ever met the war god. But the personally taught disciples of the war god were qualified to meet him. From this, one could see the extremely elite status the war god's personally taught disciples held. In the past, when that prodigy sword saint, Olivier, had refused the enticing offer to become a personally taught disciple of the war god, everyone was shocked and filled with admiration. The personally taught disciple of the war god would definitely be a person of enormous talent. At the very least, he would be a warrior of the 9th rank, and one with the possibility of reaching the saint level. Warden's words were based on historical precedent. However, there are too many experts of the 9th rank in the Empire, and talent level is difficult to determine as well. It is very hard to say who the war god will accept as his personal disciple. Suddenly, the carriage came to a halt. "Princess, we've already reached War God Mountain. There are too many people up ahead. The carriage can't pass through," the driver called out. Warden immediately helped Nina off the carriage. "There are so many people here." Seeing the sea of people in front of them, Nina couldn't help but be afraid. At the base of the cloud-topped War God Mountain, people were densely clustered everywhere. Earlier, carriages might have been able to advance, but now, none would be able to. The mountain roads were filled with people. "Nina." Warden smiled towards Nina. "Gruel." The saber-toothed tiger, who had been following the carriage the entire time, leapt over. Warden put Nina on top of it. "Have a good seat and take a firm grip. We'll take a shortcut." Nina was both a warrior and a magus. Although she wasn't very powerful, she was able to clutch quite tightly to the saber-toothed tiger's neck. "Let's go." Nina was very excited. The saber-toothed tiger immediately soared into the air, with Warden traveling at high speed by its side. Warden and Nina didn't take the main road, rather, they took some hard-to-traverse side roads from the back of the mountain. Even the toughest, steepest of mountain paths were as easy for the saber-toothed tiger to traverse as flat land. Warden was extremely agile as well. The two of them clambered up at high speed. On the way, they encountered quite a few powerful experts who were using the same method as they were. After all, if they had to squeeze in through the main road, who knew how long it would take? "Here we are." With a final leap, Warden and the saber-toothed tiger arrived at the main plaza. "Wow! I'm so scared that my entire body is covered with sweat now." Nina's little face was very red. She hopped off the saber-toothed tiger's back. The neat, flat stone plaza in front of them was extremely large. There already were over 10,000 people present, and yet it didn't seem crowded at all. In fact, to the contrary, it seemed rather empty. "Big Lunk, did you know that this huge training school's foundation was originally created by the war god himself? That year, he used one stroke of his sword to slice off the main peak of War God Mountain, then had the War God's College built on the now flat land." Warden was astonished at the war god's power. In truth, War God Mountain actually had several mountain peaks, with one being the primary peak. But the war god effortlessly chopped it off with one blow of his sword, creating a flat surface, upon which these various buildings of the war god's college were erected, becoming the place where the honorary disciples of the war god's college would stay. According to legend, the personally taught disciples of the war god lived at another mountain peak. "It isn't time yet. Let's have a rest." Holding Nina's hand, Warden headed to a nearby stone bench and took a seat. The plaza began to fill up with more and more people. Finally, the appointed time came. On the tall dais in the front part of the plaza, there were a large number of people, all of whom were the honorary disciples of the War God's College. Warden's competitor, Lamont, was there as well. "Look! A saint-level expert! Someone is flying over." Warden and Nina all looked upward into the sky. They saw 3 human forms dressed in blue robes flash through the air, flying shoulder to shoulder towards the dais. Finally, they landed. 3 saint-level experts. Everyone present felt their hearts tremble. Normally, even a single saint-level expert was a rare sight, but now, 3 had appeared. After landing, one of the 3 saint-level experts, a middle-aged man who appeared to be the leader, said in a loud voice, "Everyone, today, we 3 fellow apprentices have come at our master's instruction to announce who the 27th personal disciple will be." Everyone grew quiet. All 3 of them are the personal disciples of the war god. Warden suddenly felt as though he couldn't breathe. The war god's college was simply too powerful. All three of these personal disciples were saint-level experts. No wonder the O'Brien Empire was named the most militarily mighty empire in the world. That middle-aged man continued, the last time a personal disciple was accepted was in year 9723 of the Yuan calendar. This is now year 10,008 of the Yuan calendar. 285 years have passed. Everyone below began to murmur. Such a long time had passed between accepting new disciples. 285 years. Many people didn't even live that long. I announce that my master's 27th personal disciple will be, Bloomer Akerlund Buletin Lumoh. Hearing this name, everyone in the plaza immediately let out a roar of joyous approval. At the same time, from within the group of honorary disciples who were standing on the dais, Bloomer quietly walked out. Bloomer was rather skinny, and his eyes were slightly sunken. He gave the appearance of being a resolute, cold person. Respectful greetings to you, senior fellow apprentices. Bloomer bowed as he walked in front of those three men. Those other three personal disciples of the war god all nodded slightly. Their leader, the middle-aged man, withdrew a scarlet interspatial ring from within his clothes. Bloomer knew that the emblem of one's status as a personal disciple of the war god was always an interspatial ring, and a scarlet red one at that. So it's him. Watching from below, Warden shook his head slightly. Last time, when he had tried to join the ranks of the honorary disciples, the one who had won in the end was this Bloomer. Unexpectedly, after just a year had passed, Bloomer had suddenly become the personal disciple of the war god. Nina nodded as she said, the seemingly common and ordinary Akerlund clan actually produced two geniuses in a row. The prodigy sword saint, Olivier, was an absolute genius who even the war god wished to take on as his disciple. And now, Oliver's younger brother, Bloomer, has himself become the personal disciple of the war god. However, Warden's heart was filled with self-confidence despite seeing Bloomer's success. So what if Bloomer was able to join the war god's college? Wasn't the point of it all to reach the saint level? He, Warden, upon reaching the saint level as a dragon blood warrior, would definitely be a powerful expert amongst the saint levels. Book 8, The 10,000 Kilometer Journey Chapter 55, A Saint-Level Battle. While the citizens of the imperial capital were celebrating the 27th personal disciple the war god had chosen in 5,000 years, in the far-off northwest administrative province, Linley and the saint-level expert, Mackenzie, were currently chatting happily over wine. Tonight, they would prepare to do battle. Tonight, the curved moon hung high in the sky, its faint silver glow covering the world, making it seem as though the entire world had been covered by a layer of gauze. Atop the small desolate mountain outside the provincial capital of Basel, Linley and Mackenzie were walking shoulder to shoulder, with Bebe seated on Linley's shoulder. The others did not come. The only witness to this battle would be Bebe. The small mountain was extremely desolate and depopulated. Aside from a few sparse trees, the mountain peak was empty and bare. Linley and Mackenzie stood side by side on the top of the mountain. The mountain wind howled drearily, rustling their clothes. Linley and Mackenzie glanced at each other, each understanding the hidden meaning in the other's eyes. Bebe very obediently hopped off from Linley's shoulders, and Linley removed his upper body clothes, storing them in his interspatial ring. He began to transform, and black scales quickly covered his entire body, while his forehead, back, elbows, and knees began to sprout sharp spikes. That iron whip-like tail began to swing about behind him, and his eyes suddenly transformed into that merciless dark golden color. That faint layer of blue light appeared on his scales as well. As immense power began to radiate from Linley's body, dust and small rocks began to be caught up in the swirl of energy. Supreme warriors live up to their name. Mackenzie's eyes lit up. Whoosh! Simultaneously, Linley and Mackenzie transformed into a pair of rainbows as they flew to the air above the small mountain. They stood there in mid-air, roughly 100 meters from each other. Mackenzie flipped his hand, and an azure spear appeared within it. In order to forge this spear, I had to spend 20 million gold coins to purchase all sorts of precious ores. After completing it, I named it Azure Flame. Linley flipped his own hand, and the blood-violet flexible sword appeared within it. I acquired this sword from a very dangerous location in the mountain range of magical beasts. Its name is Blood Violet. With regards to his abilities in using Blood Violet, Linley had reached the 4th level, Profound Truths of the Wind. However, Linley had only reached the first, simplest stage of the Profound Truths of the Wind, which he had named Rippling Wind. But despite that, when combined with the unique properties of Blood Violet, Linley still felt confident in his ability to deal with Mackenzie. Being at the saint level makes me feel as though I am filled with boundless power. Wielding the Blood Violet God's Word in his hands, Linley felt extremely confident. In the past, it was impossible for me to use Blood Violet to harm a saint-level combatant. It wasn't that Blood Violet was insufficiently sharp, it was that my own battle chi and strength was far from being sufficient. How could the weapons used by most experts, in terms of sharpness, compare with this divine artifact, the Blood Violet God's Word? Blood Violet was so sharp that if one didn't use any battle chi, just by virtue of its sharpness, it could pierce the defense of most magical beasts of the 7th rank. How many weapons could possibly compete with such terrifying sharpness? Once it was matched with a saint-level amount of battle chi, its sharpness and power would reach an even more astonishing level. Then, let us begin. Mackenzie's body began to radiate a boundless desire for battle. Standing high up in the air, as the wind blew his long robes about, Mackenzie's body suddenly began to be covered with a layer of crackling flame, and the azure flame spear in his hands began to emit flame as well. His entire body seemed to have been covered by fire. Clad in flame, and holding his spear at the ready, Mackenzie looked like a god of battle. His battle chi has actually reached such a level. Linley's eyes lit up. Boom! Linley's own battle chi exploded as well, as that azure black battle chi totally covered Linley's body, and also activated Blood Violet. Those azure black scales were totally covered by that azure black battle chi, making Linley look like a demon from the infernal realm. A hint of a smile was on Mackenzie's lips. Suddenly, swish! Linley only saw a blur as Mackenzie slashed his way through the air at him. The spear in Mackenzie's hands, burning with flame, seemed to have locked down all the surrounding space as it pierced towards Linley with tremendous, boundless power. At this moment, it seemed as though the only thing which existed in this world was that spear. Clang! A strange, devilish purple light gently slashed open the locked space, and the tip of the sword clashed against the tip of the spear. As they did, Linley and Mackenzie's battle chi exploded through their weapons at each other. Boom! A terrifying explosive sound blasted forth from between the two of them as the power released from this clash of two saint-level experts burst forth in all directions. Even the boulders dotting the mountain beneath them began to crack apart from the released battle chi. The two separated at high speed after the clash. Linley glanced at Mackenzie once. His battle chi is actually slightly more powerful than mine. Dragon Blood warriors simply possessed too much natural talent. Even an early-stage saint-level Dragon Blood warrior would only have just slightly less battle chi than an ordinary mid-stage saint-level combatant. Of the four supreme warriors, the Undying warriors had the best defense, the Tiger-striped warriors had the highest speed, the Violet Flame warriors had the fastest healing speed, but the Dragon Blood warriors had the best offense. Dragon Blood warriors were nothing to joke about. Haha, wonderful! Take another attack from me. Mackenzie laughed loudly as he charged towards Linley at high speed again, transforming into 3 separate mirages as he did so. You want to compete in speed? Linley smirked. Linley's body blurred, then transformed into 3 separate mirages as he charged towards Mackenzie as well, leaving a streak behind in the sky as he did so. Harg! The previously refined Mackenzie was now extremely wild and unrestrained as his 3 mirages transformed into 9. But somehow, those 9 shadow Mackenzies were all wielding the spear in their hands in a different manner. Bam! The 9 mirages spun their spears in different ways, then thrust their spears at Linley. Originally, Linley had only seen 9 spears, but after those spears coiled about mysteriously, suddenly, it seemed as though the entire world was filled with countless spear shadows. An infinite number of spear shadows, giving Linley no place to run. "Ha!" Linley laughed loudly, while at the same time, he himself transformed into a whirlwind of action. In what seemed like the blink of an eye, Linley's entire body had turned into a spinning tornado, and surrounding that spinning tornado were countless flashes of that devilish purple light. Those countless spear shadows were all blocked by those countless flashes of violet light. Mackenzie was stunned. "Tornado technique shatter!" Linley roared loudly, and then he slammed towards Mackenzie as though he were a giant warhammer. In the blink of an eye, that blood-violet sword in his hand seemed to have transformed into 10,000 different swords. Those sword strikes all seemed so light and graceful, but when they collided against Mackenzie's spear, Mackenzie felt as though they each had the power of a thunderbolt. Wielding something light as though it were heavy. Bam! 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 Linley's entire body had been transformed into a tornado, and Mackenzie had a feeling as though the heavens themselves were aiding Linley. The strangest thing was, it seemed as though the sword in Linley's hand could disappear then reappear at will. Under these repeated assault, Mackenzie was forced down to the ground from the sky. Bam! Mackenzie landed heavily on the ground, and the earth around him cracked as dust swirled up everywhere. The flames atop of Mackenzie's body began to burn even hotter, and the warlike look in his eyes grew only more wild. Linley landed heavily on the ground as well. Covered in azure black battle chi, the aura Linley gave off was totally opposite compared to Mackenzie's. One was domineering and tyrannical. The other was dark and mysterious. Mackenzie lowered his head to glance at his chest. Fresh blood oozed out from beneath his clothes, and then evaporated under the intense heat of the flames. But Mackenzie's blood-stained clothes indicated that he clearly had been wounded. "Linley, I could understand your movements, but there was one thing I couldn't understand. How could that blood-violet god's word of yours fuse with the wind so well?" Mackenzie was a very experienced saint-level combatant. The level of impose was that of using the imposing force of the heavens and the earth. But the amount of natural force which Linley had used to support his attack was truly frightening. Of course there is a limit to the amount of energy which the heavens and earth can loan you. As for the reason why you had such trouble defending, smiling, Linley lifted blood violet into the air, and it suddenly, bizarrely, began to curve about every which way. If you wanted a sword to be sufficiently hard and sharp, one of the prerequisites for that was that the sword would not be able to be very flexible. This is a flexible sword." Mackenzie was very surprised. Just then, when Linley exchanged blows with him, he had used blood violet to attack in curving arcs. However, due to Linley's usage of impose, the impression that Mackenzie had gotten was that the sword would suddenly disappear, then appear from somewhere else. This was another way one could use impose. "Right. This is a flexible sword," Linley said. "But how can a flexible sword fight head-on against my azure flame spear?" Mackenzie was very shocked. The reason why a flexible sword could straighten and be hard was because of battle chi. But how could a weapon which relied on battle chi to become straight be comparable to a weapon that was straight to begin with? Mackenzie's azure flame spear was also a very precious spear. "This is a divine artifact." Linley didn't hide anything. "A divine artifact?" Mackenzie nodded in amazement, and then laughed loudly. "Wonderful. Linley, next I will use my ultimate attack. Be careful. I have a special attack that I haven't used either." Linley was very confident as well. Right now, both men were on the ground, staring at each other. "Arg!" Mackenzie suddenly began to move. He lifted the spear in his hands, pointing it at the sky. Suddenly, with Mackenzie as the focal point, an endless wave of flame began to spew out in every direction. In the blink of an eye, within several hundred meters, everything had turned into a world of flame. Linley was surrounded and caged in as well. His dark golden eyes watched emotionlessly. Within this world of flames, Mackenzie's image appeared everywhere, along with his spear. Oppressive. This world of flames seemed to be suppressing Linley, and there was no imposing force Linley could draw upon. Rumble, one indistinct spear after another suddenly pierced through the air, thrusting towards Linley. Combined, they formed a seemingly very real fire dragon, which was coiling forth from the flames and roaring at Linley. And at the same time, behind Linley as well, Mackenzie bizarrely appeared out of nowhere as he thrust the spear in his hands toward Linley. One in front, one from behind. Linley had nowhere to run. Rippling wind. Linley began to move, and the blood-violet flexible sword in his hands suddenly transformed into countless vipers, colliding and striking against the various spear shadows that were attacking from all around him. Each time his sword struck against a spear, there was a thunderous boom. That astonishingly powerful fire dragon seemed to have been surrounded and wrapped around by a large number of enormous pythons, and as the pythons constricted it, it exploded violently. Slash! Mackenzie's spear thrust out towards Linley from behind. But that blood-violet flexible sword very nimbly and agilely curved backwards, blocking the spear. As the flexible sword bounced off the spear, Linley too immediately went flying backwards, moving farther away from Mackenzie. Bam! 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 To his astonishment, Mackenzie had discovered that the area around Linley seemed to have suddenly given birth to wild gusts of wind, while the blood-violet sword in Linley's hands seemed to have turned into a violet bolt of thunder, striking in every direction. In the blink of an eye, his world of flames had been broken open. Linley had already located Mackenzie. Whoosh! 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 The blood-violet sword in Linley's hands would appear and disappear at random. In Mackenzie's eyes, all he could see were countless sword tips stabbing towards him. It was simply too fast. So fast that Mackenzie wasn't able to block them all, and his only option was to rouse his battle chi to defend against it. Countless sword tips pierced against his protective layer of battle chi, and each blow contained an astonishing amount of force. With a sudden exploding sound, that layer of battle chi blew apart, the force of it causing the earth to rumble, creating 10 terrifyingly deep canyons in the ground. Dust flew everywhere. After a long period of time, the dust finally settled down. Mackenzie's clothes were totally ruined, unsightly beyond repair. Mackenzie glanced at Linley. Chuckling, he nodded. I lose. But Linley stared suspiciously at Mackenzie. Mackenzie, why were all the spear shadows in your world of flames so weak and illusionary? My sword easily broke every one of them. If all of those attacks were real, I would have lost. Linley had already reached a very high level of understanding. He could tell that those spear shadows were totally capable of becoming real attacks. In other words, those countless spear shadows could all be real spears. It would have been very difficult for him to block them, if that were the case. But just then, he had easily broken every single spear shadow. Haha, if all of them were real, then I would be a peak stage saint-level expert. Mackenzie laughed. My current world of flames can only reach this current level. How is it that your rippling wind technique can be so fast? It was even more terrifying than what you were using when we started. Mackenzie asked in puzzlement. Linley explained, when we first started to fight, I was only borrowing the imposing force of the wind. As for the rippling wind technique, that was part of the insights I gained with regards to the profound truths of the wind. The sword can become one with the wind, and wherever the wind is, the sword can appear. The rippling wind was indeed fast. Terrifyingly fast. Linley was only able to develop this terrifying technique thanks to the unique properties of the blood-violet sword. Using blood-violet with this technique, it wouldn't be hard for Linley to produce over 10 million sword attacks in the blink of an eye. Book 8, The 10,000 Kilometer Journey Chapter 56, The Mage Eyesight Core. Wherever the wind is, the sword can appear. Hearing these words, Mackenzie was truly shocked. If he hadn't personally sparred with Linley, upon hearing these words, Mackenzie would have taken them to be an empty boast. But just then, he himself had sensed the terrifying speed of those sword attacks, which had reached a speed that was 100 times faster than his own. There was no way for him to block them, and so he had to rely on his battle chi to defend against it. To be forced to such a state, Mackenzie was thoroughly convinced of Linley's superiority. "Linley, you spoke of merging and becoming one with the wind. I do not understand what you mean," Mackenzie said, frowning slightly. Linley didn't try to hide anything. Laughing, he said, "Mackenzie, you must understand, the wind itself is invisible and formless, but it can be both as fast as the lightning, or utterly slow and calm. My profound truths of the wind is, in truth, based on that small amount of insight I have gained into the laws of the wind." The laws. Mackenzie's eyes were filled with admiration. The highest of truths. Every sort of elemental law was extremely profound and mysterious. In truth, if one could master and understand a sufficiently large amount of one of these laws, then one's soul would totally merge with the elemental world and crystallize into a divine spark, allowing one to reach the deity level. As for Linley, he had just barely scratched the surface of these laws. Whether it was the profound truths of the earth or the profound truths of the wind, Linley had only understood the smallest portion, like a single drop of water in an endless sea. By merging with the wind, my sword can appear wherever the wind is. But this sort of technique has a very high requirement with regards to the composition of the sword itself, because it requires the sword to almost instantly move from one place to another, causing the sword to come under enormous stress. Linley smirked. If there was no such requirement or drawback, then wouldn't I be able to essentially teleport myself around by merging into the wind? Linley could indeed merge with the wind, but his body simply couldn't handle the amount of speed and stress it would suffer from teleportation-like movement speeds. Haha, teleportation, eh? Even deity-level combatants are not capable of such a thing. Mackenzie sighed. No matter how powerful an expert was, even one such as the war god, they could at most move as fast as lightning. No one was capable of teleportation. Although people often talked about teleportation, that was just how the weak described the high-speed movements of saint-level experts who did battle. Saint-level experts were simply too fast. Those ordinary people could only see that the saint-level experts were sometimes here, and other times there. They took this to be teleportation. In truth, there was no such thing as teleportation. Even if there was, it wasn't something which the likes of the war god was capable of. Mackenzie, what about that technique of yours? What was that all about? Just now, I couldn't sense you at all. I felt as though all of those countless spear shadows surrounding me were real. Linley stared at Mackenzie questioningly as well. When saint-level experts sparred, it did indeed help them learn more and faster. Naturally, Linley wouldn't give up this opportunity by being shy about asking. Mackenzie laughed. Actually, this sort of attack is a fairly common one. Generally speaking, most peak stage saint-level combatants use such an attack. Oh! Linley looked at Mackenzie in astonishment. In the past, during the war god's battle with the high priest, many experts witnessed the terrifying power of a deity's god realm. Afterwards, many saint-level combatants wanted to create an attack that could duplicate the effect of a god realm. In truth, that attack I used just now was a sort of pseudo-realm attack. Mackenzie laughed at himself self-deprecatingly. Linley continued to look at Mackenzie. What Linley wanted to know was the underlying principles behind this sort of attack. Actually, this sort of attack is extremely wasteful. Mackenzie said emotionally. For example, I myself am a practitioner walking on the path of understanding the laws of fire. Every saint-level practitioner had their own paths to understanding the various laws. Only, they would all focus on different types of laws. This attack, the pseudo-realm, basically forces one to blast out all of one's battle chi, while at the same time summoning and igniting all of the surrounding area's fire elemental essence, causing everything within 100 meters to turn into a sea of flame. Because my own battle chi has merged with the fire elemental essence, this causes the entire sea of flame to be imprinted with my own aura, making you unable to detect where my true body is located. However, my control is insufficient. I can only control my battle chi to form a single true attack from the elemental essence. If I were able to control all the other spear shadows and change them into real attacks, you would be in a great deal of trouble. Mackenzie laughed. Linley was beginning to understand. The underlying principles of this technique were quite simple. The difficulty lay in the control of elemental essence. For example, impose was just borrowing on the natural force of the heavens, but this pseudo-realm was different. It required complete control. Generally speaking, it was impossible for a saint level to totally control all the elemental essence in a given area. This was something only a deity level expert could perform. But saint level experts were very intelligent. By blasting out all of their battle chi, they allowed their battle chi to merge with the elemental essence, then used it to control the elemental essence. Although it required them to use a large amount of effort and battle chi, they were able to just barely create this pseudo-realm. But despite that, its control over elemental essence was far inferior to that of the Godrealm technique. Linley had personally experienced how the King of Killers, Caesar, had used the power of his Godrealm to freeze both Linley as well as the peak stage saint-level expert, Stella, in the blink of an eye, causing them both to be unable to move. That sort of control over elemental essence was absolutely terrifying. Compared to it, the pseudo-realm was far weaker. This pseudo-realm does have its strong points. Although it consumes a huge amount of battle chi, as long as one is at a high level of understanding, one can suddenly create 10 million attacks out of nowhere. In addition, it also allows one to hide one's body. It is more powerful than my own rippling wind technique. The only weakness is that it uses up too much battle chi, and is very wasteful. But then, Linley quickly shook his head. No. This is simply a clever little technique to mimic the Godrealm ability. Although it is a test of a person's ability to control elemental essence, it has virtually nothing to do with a person's actual level of understanding with regards to the laws. Linley believed that this was definitely a wrong path of training, not a correct path. Earth, fire, wind, water. Each had its own laws, such as the laws of the earth. A complete, perfect set of elemental laws was like a complete, perfectly constructed building. Every single brick in this building was akin to one of the profound mysteries of the laws. Each law contained within it countless numbers of profound mysteries. Linley had gained insight into one particular mystery, and had developed his vibrational attack technique. This should be considered one of the higher class mysteries of the laws of the earth. After this battle, both Linley as well as Mackenzie were now in absolutely tattered clothes. But of course, only Linley's pants were torn. The two changed their clothes, then smiling, left the mountain. Squeak! On Linley's shoulders, Bebe delightedly squeaked at Mackenzie, baring his fangs. It was as though Bebe was mocking Mackenzie for losing. You little rascal! Geez, Mackenzie laughed involuntarily. Linley laughed as well. Per Linley's instructions, Bebe wasn't giving any sign that he was at the saint level of power. Only when it was absolutely necessary would Linley reveal this trump card of his. Under the moonlight, the two saint-level experts chatted and laughed on the way back to the provincial capital of Basel. The next morning, no matter how Mackenzie tried to persuade him, Linley was still determined to head off to the imperial capital. Out of options, Mackenzie personally sent them off, escorting them for over 100 kilometers. By nightfall, the group arrived at a harbor at the Yulon River. Early on, Mackenzie had sent people to arrange a 3-story boat for Linley at the harbor. Mr. Mackenzie, there's no need to escort us any further. By now, Linley was on extremely good terms with Mackenzie. This Mackenzie had escorted them for 100 kilometers, all the way to the port. How could Linley not be grateful for Mackenzie's kindness and courtesy? Brother Linley, I really hate the fact that I can't spend a few more months with you. However, you are in a rush to meet with your little brother, so I know it isn't appropriate for me to insist on you staying either. Mackenzie said seriously. Brother Linley, have a safe trip. As Mackenzie watched, Linley's group boarded this ship, and then, following the tides of the Yulon River, began to sail south. The Yulon River was extremely wide, and the river waters were turgid. This ship was much finer than the ship Linley had previously rented. In addition, the skills of its sailors were much higher as well. Although they went down the same general direction with the flow of the river, they were clearly moving much faster than before. This is the Yulon River? It really is huge. Barker and his brothers were standing at the railing, staring at the roiling river waves, their eyes shining. Barker and his brothers came from the 18 northern duchies. They were used to seeing the land covered in snow and ice, but had never seen such an enormous river. Rebecca and Lena were very excited as well, while Jen chatted with them about the Yulon River. Right now, Bebe and Haru, the two magical beasts, were growling in conversation to each other. Linley knew that ever since Bebe had reached the saint rank, Haru had felt all the more ashamed in front of Bebe. After all, Haru was a peak stage magical beast of the 9th rank. He was used to being proud and arrogant. But now, he had suffered a severe mental blow due to Bebe. Haru, come with me. Linley glanced at Haru, then headed directly to the second floor of the ship. Bebe and Haru immediately followed after him. Right now, the second floor of the ship was fairly empty. Boss, why'd you have Haru come over? Bebe suddenly asked. While outsiders were present, Bebe didn't dare to speak, but now, with no one else present, Bebe was going to have a good, spoken chat. Bebe actually very much enjoyed speaking in human tongues. Haru's cold eyes stared questioningly at Linley. He didn't know what his master, Linley, was planning to do. Haru, in the past, didn't you and Bebe both want that darkness-type saint-level magi sight core? Linley laughed. Hearing these words, the intelligent Haru instantly understood what Linley intended to do, and his eyes immediately lit up. Boss, you are giving him the saint-level magi sight core. Bebe was able to guess it as well. What, are you opposed? Linley looked at Bebe. Bebe happily shook his little head, then looked at Haru pityingly as he said mockingly, of course not. Although Haru is sometimes a little bit cocky, he's still a fine fellow. In the future, he'll be following me, right? I'm a saint-level magical beast. If my followers are too weak, that'll be really embarrassing to me. Listening to Bebe's words, Linley couldn't control his laughter from coming out. Enough. Haru, eat this saint-level magi sight core, then go to your room. I won't let anyone disturb you. With a flip of his hand, Linley retrieved that darkness-style saint-level magi sight core he had acquired so long ago. Thinking back to the affairs of his youth, and that terrifying battle between the armored razorback Wyrm and the saint-level violet tattooed bear, Linley couldn't help but secretly sigh. Time had gone by. The current Linley most likely had the strength to fight head-on against the armored razorback Wyrm or the saint-level violet tattooed bear. But back then, all he could do was hide. Bebe, you go to Haru's room as well. Help me keep an eye on him. If anything important and out of the ordinary happens when Haru is trying to break through, immediately inform me. Linley was concerned about any side effects Haru might have from eating the saint-level magi sight core. Got it, boss. Bebe puffed out his chest, saluting. Linley tossed the darkness-style saint-level magi sight to Haru. Haru opened his jaws, catching it in his mouth as he cast a grateful look at Linley. Given his level of intelligence, Haru knew exactly how valuable a saint-level magi sight core was. What's more, it wasn't a guarantee that he would break through upon eating the saint-level magi sight core. He did have a chance of failure. But Linley still had given him the saint-level magi sight core. I hope Haru won't disappoint me. Watching Haru and Bebe enter Haru's room, Linley secretly sighed. And then, he once more returned to the main deck, enjoying the view of the turgid waters of the Yulon River. The ship continued to head south through the Yulon River at high speed as it had previously. As for the Black Cloud Panther, Heru, he was beginning to charge towards the barrier between him and the Saint Level. Book 8, The 10,000 Kilometer Journey Chapter 57, Yet Another Saint Level. A Saint Level Magi Sight Core contained the essence of a Saint Level magical beast's magical power. A Saint Level Magi Sight Core was something that was very hard to consume, and which would take a significant amount of time to do so. In the past, because Linley had the legendary Dragon Blood Warrior bloodline, his special bloodline eventually dissolved and absorbed that 9th rank Magi Sight Core of the armored Razorback WIRM. But even after he had dissolved and absorbed that Magi Sight Core of the 9th rank, the residual energy of the core remained in Linley's body, alongside his dragon blood. It hadn't been totally mastered and utilized by Linley. As the current continues to take us south, from here to the Southwest Administrative Province, we will have traveled more than 3,000 kilometers. Such an enormous distance will take several days, even though we are following the current. Looking at the roiling waves, Linley said to himself. Who knows if a few days would be enough for Heru to finish dissolving and absorbing that Saint-level Magi Sight Core. Linley himself didn't have any experience of course when it came to the subject of peak stage magical beasts of the 9th rank absorbing Magi Sight Cores. Gates, why are you going back inside? The scenery around the Yulon River is pretty good. The third brother, Hazer, said in a loud voice. Of the Barker brothers, 4 were standing in front of the railing, enjoying the beautiful sights of the Yulon River. Only Gates was heading back into the cabin. Big bro and second bro have already made their breakthroughs, third bro. You guys can watch, but I'm not in the mood. I don't want to waste time. I'll go back and train. Gates replied back loudly. Hazer was caught off guard. Linley turned to stare at Gates in surprise. Right now, only 2 of the 5 had mastered the level of wielding something heavy as though it were light. One was Barker, while the other was Gates. Gates was a very proud person. Linley knew this quite well. Gates is right. The fourth brother, Boone, nodded as well. I will go train as well. The third brother, Hazer, followed Boone into the cabin as well, leaving behind just Barker and Ank. The 2 exchanged glances, then began to laugh. Second bro, you have to work hard. If Gates makes a breakthrough, he'll be more powerful than you. Barker laughed as he spoke to Ank. Ank nodded, drawing out the 2 giant long-handled Griataxes on his back. I'm going to the rear deck to train with my weapons. I'll go with you. Barker drew out his own long-handled Griataxes as well. The long-handled Griataxes of Barker and his brothers were quite astonishing. These might be the heaviest weapons that existed in the modern world. 5,300 pounds each, they were quite suited to the Undying Warriors, famed amongst the Supreme Warriors for their strength. Zisler laughed as he stroked his white beard. Those 5 brothers really have become quite hard-working. They make this old man feel a bit ashamed. But despite saying that, Zisler continued to admire the local scenery. At Zisler's current level, what he needed was a flash of insight. Training alone wouldn't provide that. Smiling, Linley stood on the front of the ship. Slowly, Linley closed his eyes. The wind over the wide Yulon River was quite strong, and it buffeted Linley's robes, causing Linley to sway ever so slightly. Linley had totally become one with the wind, and could sense the movements of the wind elemental essence. Time flowed on like water. In the blink of an eye, 4 days had passed, and the ship had entered the domain of the Southwest Administrative Province. In 2 days or so, they should be able to reach the harbor they were aiming for. Big brother Linley is training. Jen said quietly. Rebecca and Lena both shook her heads, indicating that they didn't know. Right now, it was late at night, but Linley continued to stand on the deck of the ship, his eyes closed. If someone thought Linley was asleep, though, they would have been wrong. because every so often, a flash of violet light would pass by Linley's body. The difference was, this time, Linley wasn't aiming for speed. When he was training in the rippling wind technique, Linley's body was always surrounded by innumerable sword flashes. But right now, there was just one violet flash at a time. No one knew what Linley was training. Wielding something heavy as though it were light. Wielding something light as though it were heavy. It can be as fierce as the storm winds, or as gentle as the spring wind. After having trained for so long, Linley finally was gaining some insight with regards to the second stage of the profound truths of the wind. Profound truths of the wind, Stage 1 Rippling Wind. This relied on pursuing speed to the highest levels. In truth, once a technique's speed reached a certain level, its attack power would also be extremely powerful. This was the reason why Linley could break through Mackenzie's defense in an instant. But the second stage of the profound truths of the wind which Linley was developing was a very unique type of attack. When he struck out with his sword, sometimes the sword would flash like lightning, while other times it would be as heavy as a mountain. In truth, this sword attack was very fast, but it gave the impression of constantly rippling and fluctuating between being fast and being slow. That was the intention of this technique. Profound truths of the wind, Stage 2 Tempos of the wind. A smile was on Linley's face. He slashed through the air with blood violet, and when it did, he gave off two distinctly different impressions. One was that this attack was as fierce and explosive as the winds of a hurricane, while the other was that it was as gentle and calm as the spring wind which blew through the willows. One technique with two opposing rhythms. These two totally opposite tempos, when merged together, can give birth to a blade made of air. Linley continued to pursue his goal of using his sword to create the dimensional edge type of attack. This Tempos of the Wind was a single target attack. Although its power was far inferior to the dimensional edge spell, which was so terrifyingly powerful that it could cut through the walls of reality itself, the power of the tempo of the wind had already exceeded that of the rippling wind technique. This was especially true in one-on-one combat. This second stage of the profound truths of the wind, the tempos of the wind technique, should be capable of posing a threat to peak stage saint-level experts. When Linley had sparred with Mackenzie, he had gained a better understanding of what peak stage saint-level experts were like. However, this tempos of the wind technique is most likely one of the more basic mysteries of the laws of the wind that I have gained some insight onto. Linley had to admit that the tempos of the wind was an extremely powerful technique. But the tempos of the wind could only be considered the most basic, rudimentary level of the dimensional edge spell. It was still a material, physical attack, which the opponent could use battle chi or armor to defend against. But the resonating vibrations produced by the profound truths of the earth was clearly a higher level of attack. Those vibrations didn't need to break the opponent's armor, it could simply bypass it and attack the internals directly. To an ordinary saint-level expert, using blood violet should be enough. Linley chuckled. Unless, of course, I encounter some particularly powerful peak stage saint-level experts. Peak stage saint-level experts had varying levels of power as well. For example, Stella and the Holy Emperor were both peak stage saint-level experts, but Stella was much weaker than the Holy Emperor. After all, the Holy Emperor trained in oracular magic. Or for example, the monolithic sword saint, Hade Sun, reputed to be the most powerful saint level in existence. To date, not a single expert had been able to overcome Hade Sun. Of course, there were people who had never competed against Hade Sun, such as the Holy Emperor, or the Dark Patriarch. They didn't dare compete against him, because their exalted statuses meant they simply couldn't afford to lose. Unless they were totally certain of victory, they wouldn't compete. The fifth day on the ship, at around noon, just as Linley and the others were eating lunch and chatting casually, suddenly, "Boss, come quick!" Bibi's urgent voice rang out in Linley's mind. Without hesitating slightly, Linley immediately began to run towards Hera's private room. "You guys, keep eating," he instructed as he entered Hera's room. Closing the door, Linley stared in astonishment. Rumble. It seemed as though beneath the black cloud panther's skin, there were small mice running around, as his muscles and flesh constantly twitched. A black light surrounded his entire body. His eyes closed, the black cloud panther constantly moaned in pain. At the same time, the patterns on the black cloud panther's body were beginning to change as well. Sometimes his forelimbs would turn snow white, while later they would turn totally black. Sometimes, his entire body would turn snow white. Bizarre. The most astonishing thing was that the black cloud panther's head was covered with two circulating gusts of blue and black energy. Boss, Haru's been like this for a while. I don't know what to do either. Bei said with concern. Linley looked at Haru. Haru. Linley said to him mentally. Master. I'm fine. Haru's agonized voice rang out in Linley's mind. Linley forced himself to suppress his anxiety, just watching and waiting. Linley's attention was focused on Haru's head. The most important part of a magical beast was their head, their magi sight cores were there, after all. In the air above and around the black cloud panther's head, those two streams of blue and black energy continued to spin about at high speed. Sometimes, the black energy would expand, but then a moment later, the amount of black energy would decrease, and the blue energy would increase in amount. This repeated over and over. And then, those two gusts of energy suddenly emitted a terrifying amount of force. Even Linley was shocked. If these two gusts of energy were to explode, most likely the entire boat would be transformed into rubble. Rumble. Linley's body immediately became covered with a layer of black scales. Without hesitating in the slightest, Linley immediately transformed into his dragon form. If he wasn't in his dragon blood warrior form, if these two gusts of energy were to explode, Linley wouldn't be able to take it. Linley's remorseless, dark golden eyes stared at the black cloud panther, his gaze as sharp as daggers. Suddenly, those two gusts of blue and black energy returned to their earlier state of calmness as they directly entered the black cloud panther's skull. And then, the black cloud panther's body grew calm as well, and the patterns on his body stopped changing. Linley let out his held breath. Right now, the black cloud panther's body was covered with beads of blood. That transformation just now had been a transformation in both physical and spiritual terms. The black cloud panther opened his eyes, staring with grateful joy at Linley. You succeeded. A hint of a smile was on Linley's lips as he immediately returned to his human form. Only, his upper body clothes were ruined once again. Yes, Master. These growling, cold words in the human tongue came forth from the black cloud panther's lips. A faint gust of blue light appeared on the black cloud panther's body, gently wiping off all of the beads of blood, restoring him once more to his normal, glossy black color. Not bad. Bei floated over to the black cloud panther, chortling. It's a good thing that you didn't waste that saint-level magi sight core. Otherwise. Haru looked away. He could guess that if he had failed, Bei would have given him a thorough beating. Enough. Let's all head out. Linley said after changing into another set of clothes. Because of how his dragon form transformation ruined his clothes, Linley had stored over 100 set of clothes in his interspatial ring. But of course, to the current Linley, the amount of money it cost to buy clothes was a minuscule amount. On the 6th morning they spent on the boat finally reached the harbor they were headed towards. We finally arrived. Rebecca, Lena, and Jen, the three ladies, all stared excitedly with bright eyes. But just at this moment, from the rear deck, the sound of loud, explosive, excited laughter could be heard. HRM. Linley, Zisler, and the others both turned to stare at the rear deck, where Barker and his brothers had been training this entire time. Barker, the 5 of you, hurry on over. We're about to reach the shore. Rebecca called out loudly. Coming, coming. Barker and his brothers walked over, laughing loudly. All of their eyes were on Linley, and there was a look of irrepressible joy on their faces. Seeing that look on the faces of Barker and his brothers, Linley began to wonder. These 5 brothers, can it be that yet another has broken through? Right now, of the 5 brothers, the oldest brother Barker and the second brother Ankh had reached the saint level in power. The others, in their human forms, were still only at the peak of the 8th rank. Lord! Barker's face was filled with excitement. Gates has broken through as well. Gates has broken through. Although he had predicted it, Linley still felt a surge of joy and excitement. He couldn't help but to turn and look at Gates. The usually loud and boisterous Gates was currently just scratching his head and beaming happily. When they had left Basel and boarded the ship, Linley's forces consisted of 4 saint-level combatants, Linley, Bebe, Barker, and Ankh. But upon landing, Linley's forces now consisted of 6 saint-level experts. Not a single empire would dare be discourteous to such a terrifying force. Taking a look behind at the Black Cloud Panther Heru, then at the beaming Gates, Linley shouted with heroic gusto, "Ha ha, everyone, disembark! Let's go! We are heading to the imperial capital! Let's go!" The 5 brothers also roared happily. Book 8, The 10,000 Kilometer Journey Chapter 58, Bloomer's Request. Linley's group disembarked at the port, beginning to travel in the direction of the imperial capital. But as this port was in the central region of the Southwest Administrative Province, from there to the center of the O'Brien Administrative Province was a journey of 4,000 kilometers after factoring in the curving roads. Such a long distance would take at least 10 days or half a month, even if one rode horses at full gallop the entire time. On the road to the imperial capital of Chan, many people were talking about the rising star of the empire, Bloomer Akerlund. I hear that anyone who becomes the personal disciple of the war god has the possibility of becoming a saint-level combatant eventually. Bloomer is so lucky. What do you mean, has the possibility? It is guaranteed. In many of the common restaurants of the imperial capital, the drinking men would loudly chat about this subject. That day, when it was announced that Bloomer would be the personal disciple, I was there myself. 3 of the personal disciples of the war god came, and all 3 were saint-level experts. Not all of his students are necessarily at the saint level. The war god has accepted a total of 27 disciples, and the first one was accepted over 5,000 years ago. He might have died by now. And there are the other personal disciples who have disappeared. Who knows if they all reached the saint level or not? Someone else disputed. You don't believe in the power of the war god? Of course I believe in the war god, but are his personal disciples necessarily that formidable? The man pursed his lips. Training requires natural talent. Look at the prodigy sword saint, Olivier. He trained on his own and yet still became so powerful. How many of the disciples of the war god can compete with Olivier? You aren't Olivier. You aren't qualified to speak poorly of Bloomer. What's more, Lord Olivier and Lord Bloomer are siblings, you know. That year, when Olivier had entered the saint level, he had easily defeated the stellar sword saint, Dylan. Thus, everyone believed that Olivier already possessed the power of a peak stage saint level combatant. Although Dylan himself was only a mid-stage saint-level expert, if Olivier wasn't at the peak stage, how could he so easily defeat Dylan? I hear that tomorrow, His Imperial Majesty is going to hold a personal audience with Bloomer and confer upon him a title of nobility. Someone suddenly said. I've heard this as well. Tomorrow, many of the nobles of the imperial capital will be visiting the martial palace. The O'Brien Empire was an empire which highly valued martial strength and valued their military. Since the founding emperor of the empire was the war god, it was natural that this was the case. Whenever the emperor of the empire wished to meet with his ministers, he would summon them to the martial palace. The martial palace was named by the war god himself. The next day, many nobles of the imperial capital got up very early this day. They dressed formally, then one after another, entered their carriages and headed towards the imperial palace. Today, the emperor was going to confer a title of nobility on Bloomer. This was a major affair. Every single personal disciple of the war god would receive a title of nobility from the empire. For an emperor to have the chance to do so even a single time was already quite lucky. After all, in the past 5,000 years, there had been over 100 emperors, but only 27 personal disciples. The rank of the title was already set. It was never as high as a duke, it was usually a marquis. After becoming the personal disciple of the war god, the noble rank conferred to Bloomer is even higher than the one I received. Warden casually thought to himself while riding in his carriage. Personal disciples had a very exalted status. After all, anyone qualified to become a personal disciple was almost certainly capable of reaching the saint level. What's more, they had the backing of the war god himself. Naturally, no one dared to offend him. And if you offended a single personal disciple, all the other personal disciples would possibly appear as well. Upon reaching the palace gates, Warden left his carriage and casually headed inside alongside the other nobles. The martial palace usually only had around 100 or so senior ministers present for morning court, but today was a special occasion. Many nobles who usually did not need to attend morning court were present, and thus a very high number of people were there. Ordinary imperial nobles weren't even qualified to join this ceremony. Those who did participate were all people with power and authority. As for Warden, he was a count who had received his title of nobility from the emperor himself, and thus he was qualified to participate. The martial palace normally seemed very large and empty, but now that it was filled with over 800 nobles and senior ministers, it didn't seem very large at all. People were everywhere. Bloomer, congratulations! In the center of the palace, many people were surrounding Bloomer, warmly congratulating him. Bloomer's older brother was a saint-level expert, while Bloomer in the future would most likely become a saint-level expert as well. Even the most powerful of clans wouldn't be so foolish as to anger a saint-level expert. Bloomer quietly nodded in response to each of the nobles. Worldly power. Bloomer didn't care about it. In his heart, the one he truly worshipped was his older brother, Olivier. Even the sword techniques that he utilized had been developed, then taught to him by Olivier. Ever since he was young, Olivier had displayed astonishing amounts of talent, and he always protected Bloomer as well. If anyone dared to mistreat Bloomer, Olivier would definitely avenge his little brother. Big brother is training alone on that mountain peak. I wonder what level he has now reached. Bloomer silently wondered to himself. Nearly 9 years ago, his older brother had entered the saint level and easily defeated the stellar sword saint, Dylan. At that time, there were some who already believed that Olivier possessed the power of a peak stage saint level expert. But Olivier didn't accept any gifts or titles. He just left by himself, continuing his training. 3 years ago, Olivier began training alone in a barren mountain outside the imperial capital. No one knew how powerful Olivier, who 9 years ago already possessed the power of a peak stage saint level, had now become. Perhaps one day, my older brother will reach the deity level as well. In Bloomer's heart, his older brother was an indisputable genius. There was nothing his older brother could not accomplish. And indeed, this was the case. Olivier was such a genius that even the war god had sighed in praise and wanted to accept as a disciple. His Imperial Majesty has arrived. Many nobles noticed that the emperor had arrived, and they immediately returned to their designated positions, forming neat rows as they paid their respects to the emperor. The emperor of the O'Brien Empire, Johann O'Brien, was a fairly just emperor, aside from that little problem of being biased. Johann was fairly tall, standing 1.9 meters high. Even after becoming emperor, he continued to train his battle chi, causing his body to be powerful and sturdy. Dressed in his imperial robes, he sat on his imperial throne, looking down at everyone. Haha, where is Bloomer? Emperor Johann laughed as he looked down at his subjects. Today, Johann was extremely happy. Neither his father nor his grandfather had the opportunity to confer a rank of nobility on one of the personal disciples of the war god, but he did. This sort of opportunity would happen only once in a lifetime. With nearly 800 people standing before him, Johann couldn't immediately see where Bloomer was. Bloomer strode out from the crowd. Standing in the center of the palace, he bowed respectfully. Bloomer pays his respects to you, Imperial Majesty. Johann carefully inspected Bloomer, then sighed in praise. You are indeed incredible. Who would have expected that the Akerlund clan would suddenly produce two geniuses? You are not inferior to your elder brother at all. A hint of a smile was on Bloomer's face. Whenever others put him on the same level as his older brother, Bloomer felt very proud. We are very happy that you are able to become the personal disciple of the war god. Today, we shall bequeath unto you the hereditary noble title of Marquis, a manor on Boulder Street, 100 guards, 100 maids, and 100,000 gold coins. Johann said loudly. Everyone stared jealously at Bloomer. Generally speaking, with each generation, the noble rank of Marquis would be lowered by one rank. If future descendants were incompetent, after a few generations, they would be commoners again and the noble rank would be lost. But hereditary noble titles were different. They never dropped in rank. A hereditary rank of Marquis was far more important than even most ordinary dukedoms. The empire had many dukes, over 100. But very few of them were hereditary. Thank you, Your Imperial Majesty. Bloomer bowed respectfully. Johann nodded in satisfaction. Actually, this gift was already predetermined. Every personal disciple of the war god was given a marquisdom, and in each case it was a hereditary title. Amidst the crowd of nobles and senior ministers, Warden looked at Bloomer, standing proudly in the center. Previously, he had lost out to Bloomer when the War Gods College was selecting honorary disciples. The gifts the Emperor had previously given Warden was the hereditary title of Count, 50 guards, 50 maids, and 50,000 gold coins. Clearly, Bloomer's gift was a level higher. Warden didn't care too much about worldly goods. But in his heart, Warden had already considered Bloomer as an opponent. Although he is nearly 10 years older than me, he's only an ordinary person. I am a dragon blood warrior. These two cancel out. No matter what, I won't let myself be weaker than him. Warden was extremely proud and stubborn. But he hid these feelings in his heart. Bloomer, today, we are in an extremely good mood. You are the first personal disciple that we have conferred a title of nobility on after we succeeded to the throne. Haha. Tell me, is there anything you desire? So long as it is reasonable, we will definitely agree. Johann's voice rang out in the martial palace. Everyone's gazes turned towards Bloomer. Actually, these words from Johann were just a form of courtesy. Historically speaking, the vast majority of personal disciples would say something like, "Thank you for your kindness, Your Imperial Majesty." They wouldn't actually request anything. "Your Imperial Majesty, your servant does indeed have a boon to request," Bloomer said. Warden stared at Bloomer with a bit of surprise. "Speak." Johann magnanimously waved his hand. Bloomer bowed before speaking. "Your Imperial Majesty, your servant has seen the 7th princess, and as soon as I saw her, my heart was trapped by her. Your servant humbly begs that your Imperial Majesty give me the 7th princess hand in marriage." After he said this, everyone in the palace was stunned. Asking to marry a princess. This Bloomer actually asked to marry a princess. Hearing these words, Warden felt his head grow dizzy. He shook his head, staring fixedly at Bloomer in the center of the palace. Bloomer only stared quietly at the Emperor. "Your servant humbly begs that your Imperial Majesty grant your servant's request," Bloomer said again. All the nearby nobles and senior ministers turned to look at Warden. Who in the imperial capital didn't know about Warden and Nina? Just a while ago, Kalin, the son of the imperial left premier, had personally sought out his Imperial Majesty to inform him that he would no longer pursue the 7th princess. Many people believed that Warden and Nina would definitely be a couple. Even Emperor Johann had been planning to select an auspicious day to have Warden and Nina marry. But this request by Bloomer caused Johann to suddenly reconsider. Johann glanced at Warden, who stood out in the crowd. At 2.2 meters tall, he was the tallest of the local nobles and ministers. Chuckling, Johann said, "Bloomer, we truly desire to grant you this boon as well, but we must also ask Nina what she thinks. Don't be impatient." "Haha. Yes, your Imperial Majesty." Bloomer didn't say anything else. After court was adjourned, Warden exchanged a quick stare with Bloomer before the two left the martial palace. For Bloomer to suddenly act in such way had indeed caught Warden off guard. The Emperor, Johann, was taking a stroll in his flower garden. He was in a wonderful mood. That Olivier cares nothing for fame or nobility. It is hard for me to recruit him. I was thinking about how to draw the Akerlund clan closer to me, but I didn't expect. To Johann, Olivier, who had defeated the stellar sword Saint Dylan as soon as Olivier had entered the saint rank, was indeed a person worth building a relationship with. And his younger brother was the personal disciple of the war god. The Akerlund clan, in the future, would almost certainly possess two mighty saint-level combatants. Olivier was so powerful upon entering the saint level. In the future, he'll definitely be even more astonishing. At the same time, I can't refuse to give face to the personal disciple of the war god. Johann frowned. But that Warden. This was the reason why Johann hadn't immediately agreed in the martial palace. Warden and Nina were truly in love with each other. Warden only has the support of the decaying dragon blood warrior clan, while behind Bloomer is the support of the war god and Olivier. Johann truly did give great weight to Bloomer's position as the personal disciple of the war god. I'll keep delaying for now. No rush. Johann decided to use the same strategy he had previously used against Warden and Kalen when they were struggling over Nina. Only, in his heart, Johann was already inclined towards Bloomer. But what the nobles of the imperial capital, Chan, did not know was that at this very moment, Linley's group of 6 saint-level experts were hastening in the direction of the imperial capital. Book 8, The 10,000 Kilometer Journey Chapter 59, The Brothers Meet. Several days had passed since Bloomer received the title of Marquis. "My lord." The guards at the gate of the Count's manor saluted respectfully. Warden seemed to have not noticed the guards at all. Not glancing at the guards in the slightest, he headed directly into his manor. The two guards looked at each other. The Lord Count has been really out of it the past few days. Just now, he was lost in his own world again. Right. In the past, he would always smile at us and even greet us. From the looks of it, that Bloomer's request in the palace to be allowed to marry the princess had a major impact on the Lord Count. The news of Bloomer requesting the princess hand in marriage had already spread throughout the capital. Many people in the imperial capital knew about the affairs of Warden, 7th Princess Nina, and Bloomer. In the main streets and the little alleyways, in the hotels and the restaurants, this topic could often be heard discussed. "Warden, what's wrong?" a voice rang out. Warden turned to see who spoke to him. It was Hillman's son, Nader. Shaking his head, Warden let out a sigh. Nader understood. The 7th princess didn't show up yet. Warden nodded. Warden and the 7th princess often went on dates together, and the timing of these dates had become quite regular. But ever since Bloomer had requested to marry Nina at the Martial Palace, Warden had only met Nina a single time, the day after that event. The next 3 days, he hadn't met Nina. He wasn't even able to see her. Naturally, Warden felt very miserable. Nader felt very aggrieved on Warden's behalf as well. Snorting, he said, "Bloomer must be messed up in the head." He actually directly asked that the 7th princess be given to him in marriage. What the hell is wrong with him? It's pointless to talk about it right now. Warden shook his head. Just at this moment. "Lord Count, Lord Count!" A clear voice rang out from outside. Turning his head, Warden saw that the speaker was the personal hand-servant of the Imperial 7th Princess, Lucy Lusi. "Let her in," Warden immediately said. The guards let Lucy run in. Panting, Lucy charged straight towards Warden. "Warden, the princess has been ordered to remain in the palace by His Imperial Majesty and is not to leave the palace. Even I had to come up with some special ideas in order to leave. This is the letter that the princess asked me to give you. Here, take it. I don't have any time, I have to go back now. If I go back late, it will be disastrous." Lucy handed the letter to Warden. Warden stood there, stunned. Before he had a chance to even speak, Lucy ran away. What is His Imperial Majesty thinking? Nader frowned, feeling rather angry. Warden immediately opened the envelope and withdrew the letter from it. Seeing the contents of the letter, Warden felt a gush of warmth enter his heart, warming it. Azure battle chi exploded from Warden's hands, reducing the letter to ash. Both a personal disciple of the war god, and the younger brother of Olivier. It seems His Imperial Majesty is favoring Bloomer. Warden saw things clearly. If His Imperial Majesty didn't restrict Nina from coming out, Nina would go find Warden, not Bloomer. This order clearly was meant to help Bloomer. Letting out a cold snort, Warden felt helpless. Even dragon formed, he would only be at the peak of the 9th rank. How could he cause any trouble or make any waves with that bit of power? Many days later, outside the imperial capital. One carriage, several horses, and a pure, pitch-black panther. Atop the panther was a young man dressed in a simple robe. "Linley, look!" Zisler, mounted on his horse, pointed at the distant, tall mountain. That mountain had multiple peaks. "That is the world-renowned War God Mountain. The War Gods College is at the top of it." "The War Gods College?" Linley's eyes lit up. The legendary and indisputably most powerful force within the Empire. The college founded by the War God who stood at the peak of the entire Yulan continent. Staring at the War God Mountain from afar, Linley couldn't help but sigh in admiration. War God. The War God O'Brien was simply too dazzling a figure. He had not only established the mighty O'Brien Empire, he had also fought the High Priest to a stalemate over the Yulon River. That battle had made him famous, guaranteeing that he would share the same exalted status as the High Priest. After 5,000 years, no one knew how powerful the War God, who had previously been on the same level as the High Priest, was now. But the only deity that was worshipped within the O'Brien Empire was the War God. From this, one could see how venerated the War God was. Linley's heart was filled with a heroic urge. There will come the day when I, too, will stand at the peak of the Yulon continent. Linley turned his head, no longer staring at War God Mountain. No matter how beautiful War God Mountain was, it belonged to the War God. The imperial capital of Chan. Staring to the east, he could already see that enormous city, reputedly the largest in the entire continent. Chan was an enormous city. Only the imperial capital of the Yulan Empire could match it. Chan's architecture was simple and unadorned. The imperial capital of the most militarily powerful empire in the continent. The place where experts reside. Chan. A hint of a smile was on Linley's lips. Underneath the dazzling sun, Linley and his team headed into Chan. No major figures paid any special attention to this group of travelers. But they didn't know that these people would very soon cause earth-shaking disturbances within the O'Brien Empire. Haha, this really does live up to its reputation as the imperial capital of the O'Brien Empire. These streets are so wide. Barker laughed loudly, and Linley laughed as well. Linley's team was walking in the center of one of the major thoroughfares of the imperial capital. Barker and his brothers had already dismounted, as they put their weapons on their backs, those astonishing long-handled Griataxes. On the way over, they had stored their long-handled Griataxes within Linley's interspatial ring. After all, the Griataxes were simply too heavy, the horses couldn't carry them. What muscular men! Many people in the imperial capital parted in front of this team. Barker and his brothers were simply too physically awe-inspiring. All of them were around 2.2 meters tall, had massive bear-like waists, and were so muscular they seemed inhuman. What's more, on their backs they carried those enormous long-handled greataxes, which gleamed with a cold metal light. Even if those long-handled greataxes were made solely from steel, they would weigh at least 1,000 pounds. But from the coloration of those greataxes, clearly they were not ordinary weapons. Would someone who was weak dare wield such heavy weapons? And that sleek, glossy black panther, who didn't have any hint of discoloration whatsoever. Nobody in the imperial capital had ever seen such a panther. This was because after the black loud panther had reached the saint level, it had the ability to easily change the colors of its fur. Boulder Street. Linley knew where Warden was staying, and everyone present hastened towards the East Chan's Boulder Street. I wager that Lord Bloomer will definitely be able to marry Princess Nina. Linley suddenly came to a halt, turning his head to stare at a nearby restaurant. Linley was frowning. Nina? That Nina which Warden likes? Wasn't it someone called Kalen who was competing with Warden? What does Bloomer have to do with this? Linley knew who Bloomer was. When Warden had taken part in the competition to become an honorary disciple, in the end, Bloomer had been victorious. Nonsense. I'm willing to bet that Lord Warden will be the one to marry Princess Nina. Princess Nina and Lord Warden have been together for a long time now. Hard to say. Look at Lord Bloomer's current status, he's the war god's personal disciple. Lord. Barker said in a quiet voice. Linley stood there silently for a while. Bloomer was the younger brother of Olivier. He had actually become the personal disciple of the war god? And it seemed that he had asked the Emperor for Nina's hand in marriage. Barker and the others looked at Linley. Let's go. Linley said. Linley's group arrived at Boulder Street. Every single manor lining Boulder Street belonged to a noble clan, and thus Boulder Street was not very crowded. Walking in the empty Boulder Street, Linley carefully inspected the signs on every single manor. Up ahead. Linley's eyes lit up. The two guards who were engaged in idle conversation suddenly noticed Linley and the others walking over. They immediately became alert, especially after seeing the enormous bodies of Barker and his brothers. These guys are definitely as tall and as muscular as the Lord Count. The two guards were somewhat shocked. Who are you? One of the guards summoned all his courage, calling out bravely. Gates was the first to reply loudly, Is this Count Warden's residence? Yes. The guard nodded. Hearing these words, Linley felt his heart tremble in excitement as it sped up. How many years had it been? Warden had left when he was 6 years old. In a few days, exactly 17 years would have gone by. 17 years. Smiling, Linley said, Go deliver the message that his big brother, Linley, has arrived. Hearing these words, those two guards were very surprised. Count Warden's older brother? They had never heard of such a person. But these two guards had good judgment. They could immediately tell how formidable this group was. Without daring to say much else, one guard bowed. Please wait here a moment. I'll go make the report. Linley took a deep breath, letting himself calm down. Linley, this is your little brother's residence. Zisler walked over, laughing. Looks like your little brother has done quite well for himself in the imperial capital. Linley couldn't help but feel extremely proud as well. Housekeeper Hyrie and Hillman were currently chatting over some wine, but suddenly, the guard ran in at high speed. Lord Hillman, a group of people have just arrived. Their leader claims he is Warden's older brother, and that his name is Linley. Smash! The wine cup in Housekeeper Hyrie's hands fell to the floor, smashing into pieces. Linley! Housekeeper Hyrie and Hillman simultaneously rose to their feet. They stared at each other, wide-eyed and filled with shock and joy. Go, fast! Go inform the Lord Count. Hyrie immediately instructed. And then, Hyrie and Hillman both charged towards the outside of the manor at high speed. Seeing how housekeeper Hyrie had totally lost his usual bearing, the guard realized what a momentous affair this was, and he immediately ran to the training fields. Soon, Hyrie and Hillman arrived at the front courtyard. Arriving before the main gate, they actually slowed down as they looked forward carefully. They saw 5 terrifyingly muscular men. Those long-handled greataxes on their backs alone made the 2 of them tremble. By the side of those 5 men, there was a skinny, skeletal old man whose shadowy green eyes were filled with a terrifying aura. Besides the old man were 3 beautiful girls, pleasing to behold. And at the very front, Linley. Hillman was the first to speak. Housekeeper Hyrie was still carefully inspecting Linley. After a while, he suddenly recognized who Linley was. He cried out in surprise and joy, "Young Master Linley!" Linley, who was in the middle of a conversation with Zisler, turned his head. Grandpa Hyrie looked just as he had in Linley's memories, with that wine-reddened nose of his. And Uncle Hillman was there as well. Looking at them, Linley found that he was totally unable to suppress the excitement in his heart. "Grandpa Hyrie, Uncle Hillman!" Linley rushed into the courtyard, his eyes beginning to turn moist. Housekeeper Hyrie walked to Linley's side, eyes red. "You grew up! You grew up! Young Master Linley, you are taller than you were." It had been 17 full years since Housekeeper Hyrie had seen Linley. When he had left with Warden, Linley had only been 10 years old. "Grandpa Hyrie, you look exactly the same." The joy in Linley's heart couldn't be expressed with mere words. Looking at Linley, Hillman said in an extremely gratified voice, "Young Master Linley, you've grown up. But you still look very similar to how you looked 10 years ago." 10 years ago, Linley was already 1.7 meters tall. His appearance hadn't changed much since then. Suddenly, frantic footsteps could be heard. Turning his head, Linley saw a tall, strong figure appear in the doorway, as though appearing from a dream. This person looked very similar to Linley himself. Linley had the feeling that this person was most likely his younger brother, Warden. Only, Warden had left when he was just 6 years old. He had changed tremendously. But Warden only needed a moment before recognizing Linley. Linley still looked very much like he did in the past. Warden's mouth hung open. His tears were already beginning to flow down his face. "Big bro!" Linley slowly walked towards Warden, his gaze totally locked on him. "Big bro!" Warden staggered forward 2 steps as well. "Little Warden! Is it really you?" Linley stared at Warden. That chubby-faced kid of the past had turned into a 2.2 meter tall youngster. "Big bro, it's me! It's me!" At this moment, Warden had totally forgotten about the issue with Nina. His heart was filled with boundless excitement. He was totally incapable of suppressing this excitement. Linley reached out with trembling hands, resting them against Warden's shoulders. He carefully looked at Warden. His face blossomed into smiles, even as tears were shining in his eyes. In a quivering voice, Linley said, "Little Warden, you've grown up." That chubby-faced kid of his memories, who had always called out Big Brother at him in a childlike voice, had already grown up. "Big bro!" Warden tightly embraced Linley in a massive hug. Having seen Warden, Linley felt more excited than he had in a long time. Finally, he was no longer able to prevent his own tears from coming out, and they cascaded down his face.